everyone to KoboldCon 2024. I'm Dot.
And I'm Kendo. And we are so excited to bring you the first ever Kobold showcase filled with announcements, reveals, and what you can expect for KoboldCon weekend.
From tips on LiveJournal to $1 million Kickstarter, Kobold Press has come a long way in 18 years. And with the launch of Tales of the Valiant and the amazing support from the tabletop community, it only seemed right for our debut KoboldCon to celebrate the launch of Tales of the Valiant.
That's right, the much anticipated Tales of the Valiant is on sale for the first time this weekend on our store and select VTT platforms. You even had a chance to sit down with lead designer Celeste Kunowicz and our Kobold-in-Chief Wolfgang Bauer to talk a little bit about design and the future of TOV and Kobold Press.
It's true. Let's see what they have to say. Hello everybody, I'm so excited to have a second to sit down with these two incredible people to tell us a little bit more about Tales of the Valiant. I'm Dot, I'll be hosting this little interview today, and I want both of you to take a second to maybe introduce yourself in case the other people out there don't know who the Kobolds are.
Sure, happy to. My name is Wolfgang Bauer. I'm the founder of Kobold Press, and they call me the Kobold-in-Chief, but the chief engine for game design is sitting right here.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Celeste Konowicz. I'm the senior game designer at Kobold Press and the lead designer on Tales of the Valiant.
Now let's just say somebody out there doesn't know what Tales of the Valiant is. Can y'all tell us what this awesome thing is?
Yes, we'd love to, because Tales of the Valiant is the Kobold Press tabletop role-playing game that we have wanted to make for some time. It's our engine, it's 5th edition compatible, and it's high fantasy heroic role-playing at its finest. I think there's a more complex answer than that, but really that's what it is. It's us going out on a limb and saying, let's do the core rules. How did we do that, Celeste?
Oh yeah, right. Well, I mean, what's great is Kobold Press has been making games and content for a really long time, so we've learned a lot, and basically this was finally our opportunity to take everything that we know we love and have learned and make it into something that is ours and something that our audience will love.
And not something I heard that's just ours, because there's a side of Tales of the Valiant that is actually for the public.
Right. So this is an open gaming system. Under the Black Flag role-playing banner, we said we're making this open to anybody who wants to use this rule set and publish their own material under the Black Flag banner. And so there is already out there a Black Flag reference document that is free and available to anybody who wants to use it. And we've seen the game's not out yet, and people are already using it.
Already so much great content.
Yeah, there's already so much. I believe there's adventures out there on some of our partner stuff, and more keep rolling through. So what does the BFRD actually mean for GMs and creators, especially if somebody has never designed on their own before? What do they need to know?
So the basic part of the Black Flag reference document is that it's all the core rules, right? It's all the rules for characters, all the rules for monsters, everything you need to know to design a tabletop adventure or a tabletop source book. It's all in one document, and it's all accessible to you to reprint, remix, spin any way you like. So the first thing to know is it's there and there's no cost to your license.
Okay, cool. Now, you mentioned, Celeste, that there's some kind of compatibility option.
Yes.
So Tales of the Valiant is not just something new, it's also a little refresh of something old. So what do we mean by actually taking the 5th edition SRD, putting our spin on it, and making it compatible?
Yeah, so obviously 5th edition is a wildly popular game, and there is, of course, in the fantasy audience and tabletop gaming, there is a long history with that game. So we wanted to make sure when we made our own system that we had a familiar place for people who might be coming from 5e or only familiar with 5e. So we envisioned and made a game that is completely compatible. And when we say that, we mean that anything from 5e can be played at the same table as with Tales of the Valiant. So you could have somebody playing, one of your players, a 5th edition rogue, at the same table as you're playing a barbarian using the Tales of the Valiant rule set. So everything in that way is mix and match compatible. So it is so easy for GMs to use material from the Kobold Press catalog that they already know, they already love, with our new materials. So we took a lot of time obsessively making sure that everything would play at that balance level that GMs could mix and match. You know, if they wanted to use Tales of the Valiant Monsters, they can go back, pick up their favorite Kobold Press adventure that was published for 5e, and just slot in those Tales of the Valiant Monsters right in there. That was something that was really important to us from the get-go, because obviously we've built up this incredible catalog in all these years we've been making, and people have stuck with us through all of this, and it was so important for us that all of these things would match like perfect puzzle pieces with each other.
Yeah. So it is true, it's a well-known, loved, right, 5th edition, but we've said we've made some changes.
Yes.
Let's talk about the changes. What's new, what makes it a little bit kobolds with teeth. I think we've been kind of playing on that idea, but what really makes the player's guide specifically different than maybe what we already know and love?
Yeah, so something we've really tried to emphasize in the player's guide is being able to customize your characters more and make more story-focused choices, even right from the very beginning, when in Tales of the Valiant, you pick your ability scores and can construct those before you choose anything else for your character. So in a way, you're already telling the story of your character by deciding, oh, my strength will be this, my dexterity will be this, okay, oh, well, my constitution not so much, and you get to tell that story right from the beginning through the numbers. And the thing is, where we're adding options like lineage and heritage, so splitting, some of these more basic concepts that are singular, we're opening up the possibilities of what kind of characters you can make and really inviting people to get that custom experience. So none of these characters play quite the same. I don't think in Tales of the Valiant you're ever going to sit down and be like, well, you're playing a rogue, you're playing a rogue. They don't look the same. There are lots of options, from our talent trees to our heritages, that allow you to make those choices and really build in story. But of course, we do also have those elements there, a lot of recommended paths if you do want to play more of a classic fantasy archetype. So we even have recommended, hey, do you want to play like a classic fantasy dwarf? We recommend this heritage with this lineage, this class combo. So
Sort of prepackaged.
right, exactly. Really trying
to help newcomers.
Yeah, trying to make it an easy experience for both new and experienced players.
Now, what is something that they're going to find in Tales of the Valiant that they may not find in any other 5th edition book? What's the new stuff? Give me the new stuff.
Oh man.
Well, there's a lot of it. In addition to all that familiar 5th edition material, right, there are new spins on some of the older concepts. There are class abilities that are rolled in. All right, so I play wizards.
Surprise!
And the ability to have magic sense and sense when things are magical around you is rolled into the Tales of the Valiant Wizard, which is such a nice change, right? It's like that should always have been part of the class.
Right. Having wizards innately be able to sense things like they do in so much of the mid-fantasy media we love.
Right? If you read a story and a young wizard is learning about magic because they feel it, that's something you can have in Tales of the Valiant. Whereas, before you had to choose certain spells, there were certain other tools you had to use. So I think rolling in some of what we assume about fantasy characters is something you get out of Tales of the Valiant that you didn't get before.
So there's been a lot of work done on the classes, is kind of what I'm hearing. Because we know things that have had many, many years on a shelf sometimes need a little love on the back end. So I have a feeling the wizard's not the only one that got a nice little zhuzh.
No, all of the classes. I think there will be things to delight at whatever your favorite class may be. There are certainly new things everywhere.
What is your favorite class, Celeste?
My favorite
Just
class?
say that.
I'm also a wizard player, but I love other classes too. Fighter is actually one of my favorite classes to play because of just the wide range of stories you can tell when you do get into weapons and get into all those different fighting styles that are possible. So we gave a lot of love to fighters and martial classes specifically in this book, including something entirely new as weapon options.
Yeah.
So this is something we played around with and introduced first in our Tome of Heroes book, and it was wildly popular, and we were like, you know what? Let's make it a core part of our game.
Yeah.
So these are things that you can do with your weapons that you, again, want those cool cinematic moments that you would expect. Being able to trip with your this, or use a pole arm to knock somebody's feet from out of them, pin somebody to the wall with an arrow shot. These are the kind of options that you can do now. And fighters, of course, are exceptional at using these weapon options as compared to the other classes. And I mean, speaking of classes too, were you going to bring up that we have an entirely new base class in this game as well?
You already did it. Celeste, would you like to tell us about the brand new?
Yeah, okay, because I'm like, my soon-to-be favorite class that I play all the time, our Mechanist class, which is an incredible inventor type that uses like a magical object called the Shard of Creation to actually be able to make objects.
Oh.
So they can transform this thing into, hey, I need a ladder. Hey, I need a rope. I'm falling to my death. This kind of stuff.
Like a real proper
Yes.
MacGyver slash.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they also have the ability to augment existing objects with magic. So this is going to be when you picture those cool cinematic moments of like a fighter mage kind of walking up and they'll run their hand over their blade and charge it with arcane power in that moment, like in combat. So it's a lot of those kind of options. So that on the fly augmenting to fit the needs of the situation.
What about you, Wolfgang? What are you most excited in terms of all these players out there that are going to put their hands on the player guide? What are you excited for them to experience out of this book?
Well, I want to say Ranger, even though I don't play the Ranger.
Okay, why do you say Ranger even though you don't play it?
Well, it's a well-loved class, and for a long time, people have said, it's not doing what I want it to do, right? It's not fitting the needs of the way I imagine this character. And the classic example is, if you would choose some sort of favorite enemy, and they never show up.
Yes.
The Tales of the Valiant Ranger basically gives you several new choices about what your character is good at, like climbing or swimming or mastery of terrain, right? That aren't the same as I'm a desert ranger necessarily. They're more like anytime I need to climb a cliff, I'm good at it because I'm an outdoor
Because
character.
I'm a Ranger, I'm literally built for this.
So it's a tweak. It's still the same character concept. They're still nature-oriented characters out in the wilderness. But my experience with the Tales of the Valiant Ranger so far is they're more useful in more situations and they're more satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, very, very cool. Now, I'm sure all of you at home want to know, when can we expect the books on the shelves? We know this weekend you can get your PDFs of the player's guide. You can join our VTT partners that have it out there, but somebody's going, I want to put it on my shelf.
Right? Well, it depends on who you are. If you back the Kickstarter, you should expect it in June.
Right?
If you pre-order, you should probably expect it in June.
Okay.
But if you're going down to the local hobby store, it takes a little longer
Yeah.
to get it distributed, both in North America and elsewhere, right? So you're probably talking July.
Okay, so we're looking at July for shelves in stores. And then our backers, which we all thank you so very much. We'll get it obviously a little early. If you batch, you should actually have your PDFs this weekend, I'm pretty sure. The rest of you can go grab a digital version if you just can't wait until July. It'll be there for you. But we actually have the box here. We don't have the books, but we do have the box that the books will be coming in. We have a couple things. So I'm gonna grab. Actually, Wolfgang, you take it because you got a better. I think you got a better shot. There's some goodies on the inside. What could that possibly be?
Hey, this looks
Celeste hasn't seen
like a
this
Game
yet.
Master screen.
So this is actually here. So let's grab one in.
It's a very large 4-panel.
Now,
4 panels.
This, and correct me if I'm wrong, we had a special piece of art done for this.
Oh, yes.
It was a full panel piece of art.
So you can see all the way. I also demanded 4 panels for all of the juicy information on the inside. And for this gorgeous art as well, right?
What the inside actually looks like.
Flip it.
Because the design team has done such an excellent job of we even have room for pictures. And
Yes.
you see the DM screen with reference images. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was
Just
obviously
squeezed them in.
really, really important to us to make something both beautiful and useful and functional. I mean, I'm sure many of you out there like me have used a lot of GM screens in your day that you wish were just a little bit more
It's legible, it's highly useful, it went through round after round of
About
commentary
20 rounds of commentary. Really, we wanted to nail this. Yes, yeah, it's so gorgeous.
It's so gorgeous.
I want to
Now,
steal it.
I was about to say, well, I'm sure you can keep it in your lap for this. Wolfgang here's got another pretty swell thing, which is the box of the two
This
books.
is the
that
slip
come-
cover.
Yeah.
Oh, the
And
shiny.
it's shiny. shiny and pretty.
It's so shiny and beautiful.
So yes, Kickstarter backers many of them will
Yeah.
be getting the 2-book set in that form.
In that form, in the box. So this is what the box will look like. Of course, everything's
can
at the
tuck
printer
this
right now. Things are being
Yeah.
printed out and being taken care of. But we're going to have them to you soon. And hopefully it'll look just as nice sitting on your bookshelf as it does on our little table here. So. Well, I want to thank you both for taking a moment to kind of tell us a little bit about the Player's Guide, what people can expect coming from it, anything that you're just dying. Because here's the thing. We spilled the beans this
Oh,
week.
yeah.
All the
Yeah.
raw beans have been spilled. You can go get the digital version, which means there are no more secrets. So is there
Right.
anything left that you really just want to make sure people know about the Player's Guide for Tales of the Valiant?
For me, it's going to be, I cannot wait for you all to see the equipment and the gear chapter. Because we did decide to put magic items in the player's guide, so players can reference now their own magic items right in those
You
pages.
don't have to
which-
ask your game master to look up.
just a surface
Okay.
level thing, but also the way we've treated vehicles, clarifying those rules, how they can be used, really making it easy, making it a core part of the game. The way we've redone tools to be very simple to understand, they're now actually going to be a really strong and viable part of the gaming experience. The fact that we've put pricing on everything.
What?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's just so many quality of life features that are going to make
Quality of life. Yeah.
Yes, going to make gear and tools and adventuring, like with all of these objects, so much easier, especially for those new mechanists coming out there who are going to be all over that chapter. And I'm really, really excited for you all to see those.
See, and equipment and the mechanists get me excited, but I have to say for me, it's 2 of the lineages where I think we are going to be able to tell some great stories around the Kobold lineage.
Yes.
Which is, how has it taken us this long?
I was about to
No,
say,
you're right.
we went,
It's
what,
core now. Yes.
Yeah.
Kobold should have been core
Yes.
from the word go, and
Well,
now they
right,
are.
Right.
And I mean, the Siderians are in there too, and as someone who has long liked the mystic, otherworldly, sort of an angelic or
The
an
divine,
infernal character.
yeah, exactly. The celestial and the fiendish.
I'm
like,
super
aspects.
excited to see what kind of stories people do with the Siderians and the Kobolds.
All right. Well, remember everybody, you have a chance to dive into the Player's Vault or Player's Guide this weekend by going over to join our organized play and actually get to try out our new Valiant 6 characters built from the full Player's Guide. Well, I want to thank you both again for giving us your time, your space, your energy, and all your creative efforts to make this book and Tales of the Valiant come to life. Tell everybody again just one more time who you are before we head out and see what else Kobold Con has for us this weekend.
Sure. Wolfgang Bauer, founder at Kobold Press, the mad fellow in the background saying, faster, more, make it magnificent.
Our literal wizard.
And the one lugging the stones around, Celeste Konowich, the senior game designer at Kobold Press and lead designer on Tales of the Valiant.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It always blows my mind how creative and passionate the Kobold Press team is. The TOV's player guide clearly has a little something for everyone, but as a forever GM, I'm never really happy until I have the perfect array of monsters and critters for my adventures.
Well, then it's lucky for you that Kobold Press has also published the TOV Monster Vault.
That's right, and you got to sit down with more of our kobolds as they reveal all the teeth and claws within the TOV Monster Vault.
Yep, and you are not going to want to miss what Megan and Wolfgang has to say. Hey everybody, my name is Kendrick or Kenda, whichever you prefer, and I am sitting here with the people behind the curtain, behind all of the fun new tools that game masters are going to be able to play with, the monsters in the Monster Vault. Woohoo!
Yay!
Megan and Wolfgang, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, my name is Megan Markle. I'm a senior game developer at Kobold Press, which basically is just a really fancy way of saying I do a lot of editing with math.
Yep, and I'm Wolfgang Bauer, the founder of Kobold Press, and I'm a monsterholic, so this is my favorite set of questions, my favorite product. Let's do
You're
monster
not allowed
math.
to have favorites, Wolf.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's not my favorite. It's one of my favorites.
I think you can have favorites if it's monsters. Because who doesn't love a good monster? There are a lot of them to be able to play with here. And I know that because, TOV is born out of 5th edition and SRD, there are a lot of monsters that are reworks, redesigns, new philosophy brought to these monsters that we used to be familiar with. But now there might be some changes. What are some of those changes that both game masters and players can look forward to at the table?
Well, they can look forward to a lot. Well, one of the things that we really liked the idea of streamlining play, right? So making it much easier for game masters to just drop the monster down and run it. So that's one thing that game masters can look forward to, is just everything that's in the stat block is what you need right now. As far as what players can look forward to, is a lot of their fire and death.
Poison, death, all those fun things that we love to run into.
Exactly.
I think players can also look forward to a fresh take on some of the art and some of the lore, because I know you were head down in the math and the playtest cycles and variants and changing that, but part of what's exciting to me about the core monsters is some of them look a little different now than they did before. And some of them have a little bit different history or culture, like our kleptomaniac goblins, who are fun. They just love banditry, right? If it's a Tales of the Valiant Goblin, they're a little more likely to be sneaky thieves, frankly.
Yeah, if you can't protect it, you shouldn't have it.
You should have known it. That doesn't belong to you because I could take it from you.
Yep.
Right? And other things are based around the art, like the basilisk, right? And at least in the case of, the 5th edition D&D basilisk had all these legs. The Tales of the Valiant Basilisk is more snake-like. It's a different look, but it still plays
Yes.
like a petrifying.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think one of my favorite art changes would be the Ettercap. Because the Ettercap was previously more of kind of an ogre type creature with a little bit of spider features. And our art director, Mark, really honed in on this is supposed to be spider related. So it even has like extra legs and all of this. So it still kind of has that ogreish type look, but it's got a lot more of that spiderness to it, which is great.
You're speaking directly to my heart. I love big spiders. I love big spiders.
They're creepy. And so we put more spin on both art and rules, right? So rules-wise, okay, I'm going to go back to the alpha playtest. I know a bunch of people who are in the playtest already know this, but we put in little variants and new twists, and you did a lot of this, on almost every monster, it feels like, right? And in the case of trolls from the alpha, we said, well, some trolls petrify in sunlight.
Yep.
Which is a long-term folklore kind of thing, but it had never been in the 5th edition D&D rules, but it is in Tales of the Valiant. So that's one, and there are others like this where bonus actions are a big part of what's different about Monster Ball.
Yes, for several of the monsters we wanted to add new bonus actions or reactions to give more variety in what they do. So for the troll, for example, it has either, I think it's a bonus action. It's been a little bit since I saw the text, so it
There's
might
a
be
lot of monsters in there, so I can understand if you forget a few here or there.
but basically it has, so it does two things. So it has a new bonus action, which was one of the things we wanted to do. But the other thing is that bonus action is tied to its current hit points. So we added a few conditional abilities, right? So these things trigger once the creature's at a certain hit points, or once the creature has experienced, X, Y, Z, similar to the recharge that you get on like a Dragon's Breath weapon. There's these conditions, and for the troll, once they're below a certain number of hit points, they get really frenzied and try and eat people to then regenerate.
That's really good. I think one of the big things I really like about that is because it makes combat feel more dynamic.
Yes.
Right? As it goes on, the combat, the circumstances change, and the way that monsters start fighting changes. They get more desperate as they start losing hit points. I think that's incredibly cool.
We've even taken some of the old standbys, like skeletons, right, and given them an extra twist here and there. And at that level, you're talking about first level characters, right? You don't need much to make them a little scarier. I don't know, what do we do? Skeleton archers?
Yeah, the skeletons have a new reaction that's like a counterattack. It has a recharge on it, so you're not counterattacking every turn, but it does give that extra little, oh, it's just a skeleton. Oh gosh, it's a skeleton.
Yeah.
And
Monsters
it's
should
something
feel scary when
right?
you're fighting.
They should, and it's one of the things about the hobby, right? Like, we've been playing fantasy role-playing games for decades. And so, in one way, Tales of the Valiant is about new players, a new experience. But also, if you've been playing for a long time with Trolls and Skeletons, you'll still find something new and exciting in the Monster Ball. Because you won't know those two tricks, and neither will your players. So it's definitely bringing a new, fresh take to the mechanics.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So when it came to like starting this redesign process, right, of all of these new or all of these old SRD monsters and trying to make them fresh and make them new, what was the thought process behind when you sat down and looked at a monster that made you go, okay, what do I want to change about this to make it feel fresh and new?
Yeah, so there were several of the monsters, because with the SRD, for a lot of the monsters, we have just the stat blocks. We didn't have any lore to go off of. So part of it, like Wolfgang was saying, we created new lore that made it kept the traditional fantasy feel, but added just a new twist. And a lot of times that new little twist ended up being reflected in the stat block. But the other thing we did with the stat block was we had on our blog recently, we had the white, the undead, that's like a martial undead type creature. And with that one, the white has always had the ability to create zombies, but why, right? So that was one of the things when we looked at the stat block, like, why does it have this? What is the purpose of it having this feature? So then we're like, okay, well, if it can create zombies, maybe it's a lieutenant, right? A CR3 undead is not going to lead, vast armies of undead. It's not going to be a general by any stretch of the imagination. But a lieutenant for a necromancer's army, I mean, does the necromancer really want to micromanage 100 skeletons? No. You get a few whites and you're like, you guys are lieutenants, just go out there and do the thing that you need to do, right? So then we drove this home with the white that it's more of this lieutenant creature, and it's got these abilities to like command skeletons and zombies and be that kind of middle management, essentially, in the necromancer army, right?
Yeah, I've had white middle managers, right? Undead middle managers. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I've had them.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's little things like that we're trying to figure out. Why does it have this ability, and what can we do to, even in some cases, further enhance the flavor in the story that has always kind of been there with the Ettercap, right? Making them more spider-like, not just in the artwork, but in the stats, like things like web walking and stuff, where they can now do more spidery things. They can shoot web as a bonus action, right? So a lot of the things you would expect from a giant spider, you now get in the Ettercap.
Yeah, I like this kind of tying in both the art of the thing and like trying to make it and like the lore and this, like it feels like everything is working together in the fiction to try to help bring out this truly fantastical heroic experience, which is
That's what we're aiming for.
yeah, like you've done it. Is what I can say.
We're trying.
So for the Monster Ball. About how many monsters can GMs and players expect to see inside of it?
I know it's over 400. I believe the count is 403 or 404.
There was a wobble at the end with a variant.
Yeah.
Over 400 is a safe bet. It's a huge number. And many are existing folklore SRD creatures, but by no means all. There's a lot of new monster goodness in there.
Now, I can see that we've got some really nice looking hardcovers, maybe even limited edition, one could say.
That
Books
is
here.
Those are in fact the limited edition covers.
Do you want to show it off for those watching at home?
Sure.
All right. Oh, there we go.
But the bad news is it's just the cover.
It's just the cover.
But it's a pretty cover. Look at
Oh
that.
my
That
gosh,
is
I
Shiny.
love
I
these.
don't know if
They
the
turned out
camera
well.
sees how shiny it is, but that's
Ooh,
really,
it's
really
hard
cool.
to show.
And you got the nice big dragon here.
That
you
is
know?
gorgeous. I love the art for Tales of the Valiant, like across the board.
It is so great.
We did challenge our director to
Spice
go big, spice it up,
Yeah.
make the Ettercap more horrifying, all of those things. We'll probably have previews of the art going out, or you can pick up the PDF and take a look for yourself, right? It is a vault of hundreds of monsters and some wonderful new mechanics and more.
Yeah, and that's available in PDF right now. You could just, while you're watching this, you could just go and take a look at all of these.
Get it,
Go
yeah.
check out the Ettercap, check out the skeletons, check it all out. So, thank you both so much for being here with me today, for being with all of us here today, talking a little bit about the Monster Vault. And I'm excited to get my hands on those monsters myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As you can see, it's a very exciting time for Kobold Press. The launch of Tales of the Valiant means a lot of new things for us. And so for the very first time, Kobold Press is pulling back the curtain a little bit and letting you in on what's happening in the Kobold Warrens. The very first thing that's happening in the Kobold Warrens is sort of about the Kobold Warrens. It's the Dungeons and Ruins Kickstarter, which is ending this weekend. We're taking years of dungeoneering experience, kobold mining, traps, hazards, lairs, treasures. It's all on the Campaign Builder Dungeons and Ruins Kickstarter, which is closing out shortly. So this is the last call to get in on that Kickstarter and just, come on, plunder the heck out of it with us. The other thing we've got going on, since we're talking about Kickstarter, is the Game Master's Guide is shipping later this year. It was fully funded on Kickstarter back in January, and it is packed with advanced rules, inspiration, campaign management, templates, monsters, everything a game master needs to elevate their game and make their players sweat a little. That will be out in September, and it's available now for pre-order. Speaking of Kickstarters even more, I'm going to do something we've never done, which is talk about a Kickstarter that isn't even happening until the fall. Our September Kickstarter is being announced here exclusively at KoboldCon, and it's one that people have seen hints of in the Tales of the Valiant materials. It's the Labyrinth Worldbook and Tales from the Labyrinth. This is the campaign setting that we have hinted at in the Player's Guide for Tales of the Valiant, in the adventures like Trouble at Mossbeard Mill, and all those hints, all that backstory, all that setting is coming to Kickstarter this September with the Labyrinth Worldbook. I'm pretty excited about it, and I'm going to just cut it there because that's as much as I'm allowed to tell you. Something else, place-specific map tiles were a huge hit for us with the Deep Magic Arcane map tiles. We decided that since they were popular, we might do it again. So yes, map tiles for forests, out now. Map tiles for villages, just shipped in April. Map tiles for caves and caverns, coming this summer. Map tiles, roads, and bridges, coming this October. Now, it's been 18 years, right? We keep telling you. We produced a lot of books, a lot of tabletop content, lushly, lavishly illustrated, beautiful cover art, incredible, inspiring art. We've loaded up our art archive so much with the creations of these talented artists that maybe we said it's time to share. We're doing the Art of Kobold Press book. Now, the Art of Kobold Press is a visual history of Kobold Press, featuring all of the best art from the past, the present, and the future. And in addition to tons of jaw-dropping art, it includes anecdotes about the creation of the art, behind-the-scenes sketches, works in progress, and commentary from Kobold Press staff. It's a beautiful collector's coffee table book. It makes a great gift, and it will be available in time for the 2024 holidays.
Okay, wow, Kobold Press has a lot of new products in the works.
It's true, but you know, Kobold Press isn't the only company out there making awesome TOV products, because new products also mean new partnerships.
Hey, that's true. The Kobold Press CEO Alexander Staingroom has all of the details about who we're working with and what awesome things you can expect in 2024.
Since the launch of Tales of the Valiant, we've started working with some incredible companies to bring you the best in virtual tabletop platforms, TTRPG accessories, and gaming treasures. This year's lineup is packed full of everything you need to bring Tales of the Valiant and your favourite Kobold Press products to your table. Right now, you can head over to these VTT platforms and begin playing Tales of the Valiant today. Along with these platforms, we're excited to announce that select Kobold Press titles will now be available on these new platforms in 2024. Alchemy, Demiplane, World Anvil, and D&D Beyond. There is a new line of Tales of the Valiant dice and gaming accessories being released this year by Fanroll by Metallic Dice Games. Already available is the Tales of the Valiant Metal 7 dice set, the 55mm Mega D20, and Tales of the Valiant gaming tray. Later this year, they will also be releasing the Game Master's Guide dice tray and dice set, which are UV reactive. Later this year, Steam Forged Games will be releasing their starter set for Tales of the Valiant. This is a perfect first step product for anybody you're looking to introduce to Tales of the Valiant and Kobold Press and role-playing in general. The starter set will include maps, pre-generated characters, tokens, and beautiful sculpts for the player characters. Forged Gaming is also supporting Tales of the Valiant with two separate and exciting products. They are releasing the Ultimate GM screen, which supports any game system that you're looking to play. They will have Tales of the Valiant specific options to work with this. Also, they are producing the Tales of the Valiant Monster Vault monster cards. Showcasing our beautiful art and having all the mechanics you need on the reverse, they will be sized differently based on the scale of the creature. You have Tarask at the table, you've got a big card at the table.
It sounds like we have some incredible product coming in 2024. It takes a lot of designers and creatives to make those kinds of things happen.
Well, that's why this year, Kobold Press is starting a new tradition, the Kobold Press Gaming Scholarship. This scholarship will be given annually to a student entering collegiate studies of pen and paper game design, ensuring that they get the support they need to enter the TTRPG or board game industry.
And this weekend, 10% of every purchase that you make on the Kobold Press store is going to support the scholarship fund. And then at the end of the weekend, Kobold Press is even going to match those contributions up to $5,000.
So this year, we are excited to announce that we will be partnering with the University of Southern California to support a student in their USC Games program, which brings together game design, computer science, art, animation, audio, production, user research, and more in a multidisciplinary community of creativity.
Kobold Press was so impressed with the USC Games program because it's one of the few collegiate programs that we found that actually offers TTRPG-specific electives and courses. We are so excited about the scholarship, and we hope you are too. So make sure to visit the link below if you'd like to make a direct contribution, or go over to the Kobold Press store, pick up your favorite book, and support the Gaming Scholarship today.
The Gaming Scholarship is just one of the many steps that Kobold Press is taking to connect with the community. The incredible support after the launch of Project Black Flag in early 2023 has inspired Kobold Press to just think bigger and find more ways for you to be able to play. Kobolds can be spotted in the wilds and these conventions in 2024. GameCon Canada, American Library Association Conference, DragonCon, Gen Con, Big Bad Con, GameHole Con. In spring of 2024, Kobold Press launched a new sponsorship program focused on supporting and funding content creators in the space. Content creators from all over the world sent us their ideas, and 10 of them have been chosen, which we are excited to announce today.
The 10 selections for Kobold Creates 2024. April Raygun. Chris Cologne for Taino Tales. Christopher Hamasu for Hamasamaku. Dane Miller for No Quest for the Wicked. Fabian Lillet for Bad House RPG. James Kidd for RPG Familiar. Joseph Kujawinski for Crit Hit Chronicles. Josephine Kim for Nameless Domain. Livy Rose for Bards on Break. And Trevor Gemma for Quest Keep. Out of the 40 submissions we received this year, sadly only 10 could be chosen. Thank you to everyone who participated, and we look forward to seeing everyone's submissions next year.
This weekend for KoboldCon, you too can come and play. Join gamers from all over the world in our online TOV organized play. You can play as one of the Valiant Six in an original Kobold Press adventure. There are even VIP games GM'd by some of the best in the TTRPG industry. Check out startplayinggames.com and sign up, or go to the KoboldCon website for more information on how you can participate this weekend.
Thank you so much for joining us for KoboldCon 2024, our inaugural first ever online Kobold Press convention. The festivities for the weekend will continue all the way through Sunday, so make sure you check out the live streams on Twitch and YouTube, the charity actual play on Sunday, and all of the organized play that you can join over on Start Playing Games. Thank you so much, and we will see you again next year for KoboldCon 2025. Happy KoboldCon, everyone!
Okay, there we go. That should be fixed. Give me 1 second. And you can give me 1 more second. Okay, sorry about that. Hey, I'm a singular kobold here, trying to do what I can with what I have got. Hello, everybody, and welcome to KoboldCon. I hope you really enjoyed the showcase. It was a lot of work. We shot it in a bunker over a weekend. We do what we can with what we've got. That's what makes us kobolds. Now, I just want to let you all know we are going to go on a quick break while we get ready for our next big event, which will be a Tales of the Valiant deep dive over the player's guide with some of the people who helped make it happen, which is our lead designer, Celeste Konowich, and one of our fellow kobolds, Jeff. So go use the bathroom, get some snacks, whatever you need to do to, make things happen for you. And we will be back sooner than you think. Probably at the top of the hour. So we will see you all then. Happy KoboldCon, everyone. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kobold Con 2024. I am here with two amazing kobolds who have been helping make everything happen as far as Tales of the Valiant, Kobold Press is concerned. Like, you two are pillars as far as I'm concerned. For the people who don't know who you are, who are you?
Hey everybody, my name is Celeste Konowich. I'm the senior game designer at Kobold Press and the lead designer on Tales of the Valiant, with a specific emphasis on the player's guide.
Hi, I'm Jeff Quick. I'm senior editor at Kobold Press. I was the lead editor on Player's Guide, and I do a whole bunch of other things that I frankly don't always keep track of super well.
I mean, you're doing
I run
so
the
much.
blog. That's the big thing I think that I do. That if you're out there, you'll see me. I'm the editor and the overseer of the blog every day, 5 days a week. Check it out.
There's amazing stuff. There's new stuff basically every day on that blog. So
Yeah.
definitely go check it out. But today, what we are talking about is Tales of the Valiant.
Woohoo!
It's been a long time coming. It's been well over a year in coming, and it's finally out today for everyone
so
to get on
exciting.
PDF. How does it? First of all, how does that feel for both of you?
Amazing.
Yeah.
I can say firmly that making Tales of the Valiant was the hardest thing I've ever done in my career, and pushed us all, tested us all in every way. And if I didn't have this stellar team of kobolds and people like Jeff, Jeff and I got to know each other probably too well over all of the work that went into this. So seeing it here, like, and coming to the end of this journey, which is really just the beginning, as the game is like going into the
Right.
public, but
Right. It's funny to talk about
great.
this as the end.
Right.
Phew.
Yeah,
Good
no,
work.
really, it's just really starting in a new way. But it's so thrilling and so satisfying to be here. And I just love that people are getting it into their hands and seeing the excitement all around. It's so rewarding.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. So, with the making of Tales of the Valiant, obviously a lot of things that got ported over from 5e were reinterpreted or new things got added on to. So my first question to both of you are, what are some of the unique mechanics for Tales of the Valiant that people can find in the player's guide that increase both the risk and reward of being a valiant adventurer?
Well, quite a bit. Jeff, do you want to lead with?
Well, I mean, I mean, one of the big ones, right? And we're probably going to touch on this a couple of times. Is luck, which was our replacement for inspiration, which just was a fun idea that just never quite worked the way anybody meant for it to. It seems, and so luck comes in, and it's nice because it's a little bit of a Benny whenever you roll badly, right? That roll bad is sort of a sad trombone moment, but you get a lift, right? You get to it, as soon as it happens, you're like, well, but now I can go get them next time, right? I've got a lift for that. I would say the risk is that you can't sit on luck. You need to spend it or it goes away, which is interesting for my players. I've been running a game of this for months, and players, it seems like generally what they'll do is, so that they don't risk hitting that cap, they'll dump 3 for a reroll, which is a nice little bit on luck, right? Normally luck is 1 for 1, right? So if you rolled a 14 and you needed a 15, you can spend a point of luck and get there, and that's nice. But also, if you've got 3 luck, you can just reroll a complete whiff, and that's how. My camera. So anyway, that's a risk versus reward thing that I think is pretty top level, but is new to this game and is a lot of fun to use.
Yes.
Yeah, there's also, a lot of what this game is, and something that we did promise people is that TOV is tuned up a little bit in terms of the player options. So you right out the gate, you are starting with a little bit more punching power than you would in a system like 5e. But that is, of course, very much balanced by the monsters got a whole lot harder in TOV. And I think for those of you who have been looking at the Monster Vault PDF and participating in playtests and the adventures, we hope it's very clear that while, you know, we are handing the players bigger weapons in a lot of ways, the risk is absolutely increased here. We fully expect and have seen in playtesting time and time again that it is all about needing to spend everything you have to survive these encounters, which is great. So it's important that you really learn your characters and that you play your options, and the options that you choose like are really impactful and feel like there is that high risk versus reward, right? How you play your character really does matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about some of those options, actually, I think one of my favorite changes to Tales of the Valiant is the lineage and heritage systems, and like how that completely changes how I have to think about making a character in this game. In like your own thoughts of the people who worked on it, like how, what was your thought process going into that, and how do you think it helps players create their own heroes in Tales of the Valiant?
Yeah, well, something that was really important to us from the get-go was increasing the number of stories you could tell with your character. So we really, really worked hard to create a very modular system that could combine like thematic concepts with actual like biological traits. So out of that came the lineage and heritage, and like it felt like a pretty obvious divide, like, okay, these are, you know, the biological traits you have, right? Things like dark vision, right? That's something a species would have, right? Versus how you were raised or what your cultural influences were. Those things aren't tied together in our real world, so why were they tied together, right, in game mechanics? So by opening that up, by splitting that apart, we were giving people more power to choose like these unique narratives, and then also let them recombine actual like traits in the game in really interesting and creative ways. So people are, you know, delighted now that if you pick the Slayer like heritage, you know, combining that with all these different things you might not have expected before, or, you know, slapping a cottage heritage on your orc and like telling that story is a really fun thing for people to be able to do. And plus also the mix of backgrounds in there now, in the way we've divided up talents, basically doing those talent trees and making background an important like almost profession based thing that your character has access to gives you completely new like talent options to throw into the equation that maybe you would never get from your normal class progression. So it really does, for those people who love finding the weird combinations and in doing those really interesting mechanical builds, this system is an absolute delight for people to be able to mix and match and create really things that truly feel fresh and like a character you've never seen on paper before.
So, and as a counterpoint, as the traditionalist here, one thing that I appreciate is that you can still make a dwarfy dwarf, right?
Yes.
There are some sort of dwarf centric sort of, for instance, I mean, every lineage has this, right? But there are some, if you want to play this, you know, traditional, more stereotypical, which I don't find to be a bad thing at all. That's there, right? And it comes together very well. You know, you no longer are good at axes just because you're a dwarf, right? You're good at axes because you were raised in a, you know, a dwarfy axe wielding kind
An
of culture.
underground society constantly fighting monsters.
Right.
Like, of course you're good at it, right?
Yeah. But that's still available to you, right? And it's although it does give you lots of like fun and unusual and sort of new fantasy kind of combinations, you can also do the archetypal thing just as easily, right? Like it's still all there. We've only added things, we haven't taken away in that regard.
Yeah, because it seems like in that way, like in being the dwarfiest dwarf, right? The most like stereotypical dwarf. Now it's no longer, you're good at axes because you're a dwarf, but it's a mixture of, it's like giving almost an explanation. This is
it's
why.
more
you
information
can do it.
for you to inform your story. Like, why are you that exact Lord of the Rings? You walk in, I want to play Gimli, like, and it explains it in depth, right? Like, it's actually more information there, and it's more like you're making the choice actively to play that classic fantasy archetype, which always feels good rather than just kind of choosing by default.
Players love choices. Players love choices.
Exactly.
And there are so many in here. I mean, talking about some of those choices, you were talking about like how talents and backgrounds kind of mix into that. Are there maybe some examples of some of those that you would want to maybe share with those who for some reason haven't already been sold on Tales of the Valiant?
Oh my gosh, yes. So talents were something that right from the get-go, I'll admit, like, walking into this, I'm like, all right, we got to deal with the feet issue, right? Like, we've got to make something cool. We've got to make something interesting. And so we designed this talent system, which works a lot more similarly to, like, video game talent trees that you're seeing here. Mm-hmm. So whereas, like, before, feats were sort of a big mash, like, optional rule, just dump, not a lot of, like, control over scaling or what they were for, we decided to build these into 3 trees that are tied to particular classes. And then we introduced options like backgrounds that actually allow you to go outside of those traditional trees. Mm-hmm. And right at the beginning of the game, you get to grab a talent that you may never, ever get access to again. But it becomes a cool choice moment, like, because of where you grew up, because of like who you are and what you've done, you get this very special thing. So it kind of serves 2 great purposes. One, again, for those people who love the min-max, like finding little ways and little hooks and the way things interact, that challenge now of having those locked trees actually interacts with like some of our subclasses that specifically, like if you're playing a wizard, battle mage, all of a sudden you're not just locked to the arcane talent list like every other wizard. You get the arcane and you get access to the martials. So it becomes this really cool choice point for those people. But if you aren't somebody who's really into like figuring all this out and looking at the options, what's great about the talent trees is it tells you right away what would be great for you as a spellcaster, right? It has this limited options. You're on the magic list. You can't go wrong picking anything on this list, right? Which is a really nice thing for newer players or people who might be overwhelmed by something like a feat system or a talent system. So by separating those, we've really tooled them to the specific classes and enhanced what makes you special as an archetype, right? Like, as a caster, why is this cool? Or like, if you're on the technical talent list, what are the kinds of things, rogues are great at? What are the kinds of things that mechanists are great at? So it really informs that kind of choice based on the talents themselves. And obviously, like, one of the big things we wanted to do is also make sure that all the talents were great. So, like, when you're looking at them, there's not obvious, stinkers or there's secret traps, right?
I really like that, too. Like, there are no... Yeah, you don't have to study the list and be like, oh, well, that's the one to not take.
That's the bad one, actually.
That's the bad one. Like, we didn't want that. We worked really hard to make sure... I mean, talents were one of the very first things we put out in the public playtests, and then they kept going into playtests, like, after that. They got playtested a lot for a very good reason.
No, that makes sense. And like, I think one of the things that, like, just like looking through the book and like looking through again all of the options from whatever, it almost even feels like, at least to me, as someone who is a chronic multi-classer, it feels like it's cutting down on my desire to do that, because the things that I would normally need to like go like dip 2 or 3 levels into another class to be able to get, I don't need to do that anymore. There's a talent for it that'll do it, or I will get a feature that lets me get into the talent list that I want to actually be looking into, rather than dipping into
you've definitely just underlined one of my secret goals with the talent system that I haven't said, but very much so reducing the desire or the feeling that people need to multi-class, right? Because certain classes, like that was something big with class design too. We wanted every level of a class to feel satisfying and to really, really reward those people who stuck with those classes. That's why you see things like the heroic boon feature now at 10th level. Two epic, awesome choices that you get as a reward for sticking with the same class.
You were really sacrificing some really solid player PC powers if you multi-class and if you can find another way to do it without multi-classing, you're probably better served to do that. And
Enter talent.
That was a choice. Yeah, and a smart one. Celeste is pretty smart, as it turns out.
Whoa.
Fly under the radar.
I mean, yeah, like there's so much obvious like thought that has gone behind it, and so much intentionality as far as like you all obviously had a very clear idea of what you wanted to do with this game. And so far in reading it, it seems like you all have succeeded, at least in my own mind, of like things that I would want to see out of Tales of the Valiant when it comes to being a player and like trying to make a character that feels new and fresh and does the things that I want it to do without me having to bend over backwards to try to
without
make it
alienating
happen.
people or forcing you to learn an entirely new system. It was definitely a super fine line to walk the entire time. And I will admit, I was always the person in the room who was like, what if we just do the totally different thing? And it's like, thank goodness people like Jeff and Wolfgang were like, okay, but remember that, and you're like, oh yeah, okay. So
Right.
it takes a village. It takes people on both ends of like pushing for huge change and championing the things that work and have always worked and should stay working. So I think we found a really, really happy middle ground. And I will say, for those people who flip open the book and just do a casual scan and go, what do you mean? Not much change. Da, da, da. That's not where you're going to see the change. Play the game and you will feel exactly how those nuanced changes throughout, because everything got touched. Everything got changed. When people are like, what's new? Give me the bullet points. I'm like, oh man.
Just unrolls the scroll that bounces
like,
around the ground.
all right.
It's more like buckshot than bullet points, right? I mean,
Yes.
lots of it's hard to point to one thing, and that's actually why I started on luck, because it's a big sort of, we can talk about luck, that's a thing.
Big obvious like
But-
highlight, yeah.
But all throughout, like lots of little things got touched and improved, and just lots of quality of life touches that you don't know until you've spent a little time with it.
Yeah, and it's the design on this felt very much like taking out the pieces of a watch and like working with those tiny little gears and refiguring it to make the watch work better and more long term, right? But the thing is, it's still a watch, and it on the outside you're like, what's different, right? So it was really interesting and difficult, I think, to find and communicate those nuance in playtests. But we had such a huge community of like supporters and helping us guiding through these playtests, and we really got great responses from you all and the people who got it and helped us make this what this is. It was incredible.
Yes, absolutely. I have this next question, but I do actually want to because I was just when both of you were talking about like how like play the game and you can see how it feels different and like just the small changes that add up to stuff. The first thing that I noticed when I was reading the alpha was the continual the removal of continual like dark vision across all of like the lineages and the replacing it with climbing speed. Which was immediately so interesting to me as far as like, because I think one of like the key things that does is it adds a layer of like verticality to fights that a lot of the times are just like in a field or like on and like it's just that was immediately like as a chronic game master, it was the first thing I noticed, like, oh, how would that change how I have to cater to the players as far as like new tools that they get to play with and like how those tools inform how I'm going to run. And I'm super interested to deep dive into all of it to see how my brain ends up changing based on stuff like that.
Well, you know, Kendo, like that, you've hit on like that is super cool. But one of the things that we did was we pulled dark vision off of a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm glad you noticed that it got replaced with other cool stuff. But what this does is it makes light an issue again, right? Because for a while the game has just, and I mean, I don't, when I say a while, I mean like over a period of years and decades, right?
Yeah.
The game has sort of traveled away from making light an issue, and beyond a certain point, you know, you don't, you know, at 10th level, you don't really need to be fussing with torches anymore. But but at a certain scale of the game, it would be really nice if light was an issue again. And when everybody but the human can see in the dark, then everybody's just laughing at the human who has to carry around a torch.
Like, yeah,
And-
hello, and it's not an impactful part of the story, you
Right,
know,
right.
it's just
Yeah.
bullying. Yeah.
Why does the dark vision spell exist?
Who knows?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so in touching on things like light and vision, for those who are like, oh, how different is this really? I do invite you to look at the SRD and just try and figure out how light in 5e works. And then just go look at ours. Same with hiding or seats,
yeah.
perception, tracking. I just invite you to go look in the player's guide. But one of the reasons we paid so much attention to things like that is because we did want them to be a really impactful and meaningful part of the game. Things like movement, mobility have kind of gone by the wayside, and we want those things back. That's why we're like, yeah, climb speed, yeah, let's do this. Also because our monsters, I know Megan was designing, I was looking at these designs like, oh my god, monsters can move so much fast. They all have reactions, bonus actions, and mobility is going to be huge. These monsters are going to be dancing circles around the players if we weren't there to step in and make sure that that's why the monk shines now, because of their mobility. Make sure that those characters who have a climb speed or a swim speed feel how great that is going to be in these very tense and tactical battles.
Yes, absolutely.
This is something that Celeste has touched on a couple of times, but I just want to like really put a pin on it. The whole Tales of the Valiant ecosystem is tuned better, I feel like. And so although it is very compatible with 5e, and in fact, you know, I've mixed and matched, and it's really not a problem.
It's really easy. Yeah, I do it all the time. Yeah.
But you will see, right, if you pull in monsters from one game, you know, and match it to another 5e game, that you will start to appreciate what there is in Tales of the Valiant that really works well.
Amazing. Well, we've been talking about a lot of like combat, going into dungeons, all of that good stuff. But Tales of the Valiant also has rules for stuff outside of it, including new downtime rules that got added. Yes. What can you tell us a little bit about those?
Okay, also on the wish list. So I think walking into Tales of the Valiant, I made two lists. I was like, the things that I absolutely need to address because they have I want them to be good, and I just have not. Downtime rules were on that. The second list was things I could live with not changing, and then I fought everyone about it all the time. But downtime rules was like, all right, here we go. Because downtime rules, one, big decision, put them in the player's guide because they're player rules. Like that was just bam, like what a concept, right? Part one. And then two, make them easy to understand, not painful, and something that people might actually want to do, right? Like, because it's cool. It's a cool idea. And I've been doing a lot of playtesting with my own group, like in my podcast, my stream groups, and really working to make downtime a bigger part of a campaign and be like, how does this actually work? Like, is this really an interesting thing to do? And I swear, it's so ridiculous. People love those episodes. People love downtime. My players now are like, when are we going to do a downtime? Like, saying it. I'm like, what? So just giving that care and love, and inviting people to think about their lives, like of their characters outside like this exact moment, letting them dream about building that perfect like suit of armor, or selling their wares, or running their own bakery, in between adventures. Like that kind of stuff really really speaks to a lot more players than I think GMs suspect or realize. So we wanted to give a basic set of really clear, really functional downtime rules to invite people to actually make those an interesting part of the story, and an activity almost that their players can engage with even when they're not at the table, right? It's something they can still think about and process. It adds another layer of imagination to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like when you were like, especially like for so many more people are running games online now, right? The idea of like downtime as a thing where like when we aren't actively playing, we can be in our Discord chat talking about like, okay, here are the things
what
that
am
I
I
want to do.
making? How much money did I earn? So next episode I can hire the goblin mercenary. It's wild what players come up with.
Yeah. And it's like stuff that you can be doing while you're not playing. So even if like you're like, I don't want to be doing a shopping episode or whatever in the middle of a thing.
So you don't have to
just
do the
it.
shopping episode now. You can just use the downtime. It manages it. Yeah, it's great. It also, too, I think something that we focused on is a lot of work went into the equipment chapter and the magic items and magic item pricing and economy. Economy was something that it's been this big bugaboo sort of in the room with this game. And downtime rules is yet another way to interact with money and make it meaningful. Because if you can earn money, if you can sell things, if you can make things that have a value, all of a sudden players start learning and internalizing money and that concept, and it links back into the whole thing. Yes, treasure is good because we can actually spend treasure now. We can actually, make treasures now. So downtime rules was a key component of interacting with that.
Yes. And talking about the equipment portion of Tales of the Valiant, when I first got to it, and I saw the art, and Celeste, I know you're a 4E fan like me.
Yeah,
my
my
eyes lit up. I was like, oh my god, this just took me right back to my first days of playing D&D, and like, it's gorgeous. You all did so amazing.
Okay, so this is so funny because one of my favorite books ever for D&D was 3.5, which was Arms and Equipment Guide, and I was like rambling, like going on about this and telling this about Jeff one day. I was like, well, Jeff, what about this book, whatever? And he's like, I like wrote. That moment was so funny and super fun for me, that like weirdly through time and space we came back together to make something that looked like that amazing book that you had worked on before.
I did like working on that book. It was pretty sweet.
It's one of my favorite books because of all the great art and actually getting to see everything. And I've always loved like equipment and stuff and objects. I mean, that's why I made the Mechanist class, right? Obviously, there you go, showing my whole thing there.
One of my pitches that I keep bringing back to Wolfgang to try to sell him on is to do a stuff book that looks like a DK like photo book. Right?
Incredible.
Where,
like a shopping catalog,
like
Sky Mall.
Where like the art or the pictures are like huge, right? And you're just like flipping through like these big pages and
I'm there. I'll fight with you.
A super good arms and equipment guide. Like,
that would be amazing.
So pretty.
Yes. Maybe we'll do that. It's if you're watching.
If you yell loud enough, someone in the
heavens. My personal favorite thing for the art in that chapter was doing art for all the toolkits, because I love
toolkits.
Yes, I love like the idea of like, what does it actually feel like on an adventure to pack up you know, your artist kit or your construction kit and carry it with you? What does that bag look like? What are the modular parts? So I got to spend a lot of time doing really fun research looking at like medieval kits and like, you know, what does a soldier's kit look like? Or like what did an artist's like easel look like, you know, pre-Renaissance? It was really fun to do.
And just to drag this back to mechanics again, Celeste did a fantastic job of clearing up like what toolkits are for and why you would use one or not use one and how they work.
Once again, I invite you to go to find the SRD and try to figure out how tools work, and then come back and look at the TOV.
Tools seem like a really fun idea that are not explained to my satisfaction. I won't speak for anyone else, but you want to use tools, but you're like, how does this work? And you just kind of wind up not using them.
Yeah, you're like,
it doesn't. Now it works, and I make my players now use them all the time. And I had to spend a few minutes convincing one of my players how easy tools were, because he didn't. He was expecting it to be complicated. And I was like, no, it's like proficiency with any skill, right? If you're making armor, there's no other skill. You just are using the toolkit, and then you get your proficiency to the roll. There you go, done. And he kept trying to make it more complicated, and I'm like, no, it's not that.
It's really not. I know you've been hurt, but stay with us.
Stay with it.
It's okay. It's okay now.
And there are lots of times when tools might be the thing that you want to use instead of a skill. And we've expanded the tools and we've clarified the rules around them so that that's a good option for a GM to if you're interacting with a thing in the game, what if you use the tools for the thing?
And like I think one of the main things I like recognized was like the examples and like the DC like examples for like various things that you could use these tools for. And then like I think it's just a wonderful like stepping off point for a player to like when they're going through equipment and they're making, you know, their character, and it's like, choose this yada yada yada. They finally have to go, okay, wait, which tools do I actually want? Because now they have an actual use.
It matters.
One of our freelance designers, Sebastian, did a great job putting together those task lists for those specific tools. He actually gave me like 10 different examples for each. I'm like, I wish I could fit these all in there because they're all so good, but we did have to pare it down a little bit. But he did a great job with making those great example task tables.
Yes. Moving on, we're getting close to our Q&A portion of this. I've got one more question for both of you, but for everybody watching right now, if you have any questions that you would like to be answered, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll have some mods grab those, and when we get to that Q&A portion, if we have time, we will try to get to as many of them as possible. But moving on to my maybe final question, we'll see. How does Tales of the Valiant offer a 5e compatible rule set while still adding new and exciting features for the game? And how can like someone who is, you know, playing like 5th edition right now, who's maybe thinking about moving into TOV, make that switch easier for them?
Yeah, well, we've worked very hard to put together some free resources and tools to basically make this process as easy for people playing at home as possible to like incorporate or make the full switch to TOV. Because we know players are always scared to try something a little bit new. So not only in the design have we bent over backwards at every angle to make this feel familiar but different in the best way. We are creating things like our totally free, like the TOV conversion guide, which just came out as a PDF, I think this morning, just dropped. It's like an 11-page guide, basically like, hey, do you have your favorite 5e subclass that you like will die if it is not right here, right now in Tales of the Valiant? Here is exactly what you need to do to make that subclass work with one of our base classes.
Mhm.
Like, we actually include every single class. We break down like, hey, you know, all right, you barbarian, move these features to these levels, do this. Hey, bard, we know, hey, you were missing a class feature compared to every other class in 5e. So either, you know, A, pick one from this list, or B, use this actual, just like we put a standard feature in there that you can grab and is like, you know, gonna be a great option for you converting those classes. We have guidance in there about converting monsters over. If you want to do that, though, monsters are a pretty easy 1-for-1. Again, we will say, you know, so we have guidance all throughout there, and we've always been committed to making this work for you all, and make this as easy as possible, especially for those GMs who, you know, might be bringing those players along on the new journey. It's really easy if you want to just secretly start using Tales of the Valiant monsters and then like the magic items. And I've been doing it to my players for the last couple years as we've onboarded that. But you will be really surprised and delighted, I think, how easy we've made it for you. And then, of course, for the people who want to start actually publishing with, you know, with us, with Tales of the Valiant, there's the BFRD. Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about
Well, you know
that?
what? We've kept referring to the SRD, and if you want to for archival purposes, you can look at the SRD, but you really don't need to now because the BFRD will do all of that lifting. It is the Black Flag role-playing resource document. Black Flag. So this, I don't know who knows this, right? But Black Flag is sort of what we are calling the system underneath it. TOV, Tales of the Valiant, is Kobold Press's sort of expression of Black Flag rules. But Black Flag role-playing is available to everybody. You can publish. It's never. There are no takebacks. And no one's looking, right? And Kobold does not get a cut of anything you do with Black Flag. So it's a really great and thorough expression of the rules, and it's available to download for free. So if you are for some reason not sold on Tales of the Valiant yet, you should download the BFRD and take a look and see what we've done, because I think it'll help sell you, frankly. And I don't think you're going to need a lot of SRD once the BFRD is sort of in play, right? So go take a look. Do we have that link? How do people go there, Kendo?
We can get. Oh, thank you, Dot. Dot's putting a link right now for everybody.
Thank you, Dot.
Thank you, Dot. Sorry if you all can hear my cat. She's getting a little too hyped for Tales of the Valiant right now.
There's no such thing.
She's like, why aren't we playing right now? But yes, well, thank you, both of you. Now we are getting into. I have a couple of questions already lined up here, and again, throughout the rest of this portion, if you all have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat, and hopefully one of our mods or Dot can grab them for me, and I can get them to you. So first question. Is when will we be seeing more subclasses officially for Tales of the Valiant?
Yeah. So obviously, you know, we could only fit so much stuff in this book. It's a gigantic book, you guys. Like, they're both so big, and we were up against page count the entire time. So we definitely couldn't fit as many subclasses as we wanted to in the player's guide. But to make up for that, we absolutely...
Very early in the process, I was like, I'd really like 3 subclasses, and Celeste was like, we'll see.
We'll see. I'm like looking at my word counts, like, we'll see.
Yeah. She didn't say no right away, but then whenever it came down to it, I was like, oh Lord, no, we
listen. Behind the curtain, I designed them.
Yeah,
we worked hard. We designed them all. So
totally.
I hoped. So we have so many sitting there, so many, ready to go. And so we are devoted to putting more subclasses out there as soon as humanly possible. You can already look at things like the campaign builder series has subclasses coming in it. So like right now, Dungeons and Ruins is live on Kickstarter. That will have TOV compatible subclasses in there. We absolutely are. I can't reveal everything on our calendar in the times to come, but we absolutely are thinking about the best ways to jam pack upcoming products with as many player options as possible. Now that you've got that system, we want to give you those options.
Just another plug for the blog. There will be a flow of new options and concepts coming on the blog. We've already got more lineages and heritages that we have been putting on the blog for a few months. We've got more coming down the line. Throughout the rest of the year, pretty much, you'll just keep seeing them. And subclasses are part of that trickle. You will see those throughout 2024.
Yeah, and I do want to say, while the blog isn't like, the 100% core, like in the book content, please do pick up those options and play them and let us know what you think, because that's honestly a really great way for us to get casual playtest feedback. So like that's one of the reasons we put these things on the blog. We want to get them in your hands. We want to hear what you're excited about, what you're not so excited about, because that is just great information about what options we should be putting in these books.
In fact, we've created a special Jiro piece of art. It's called Kobold Cauldron, right? Which we will be doing throughout the rest of the year, where we just sort of release what I'm referring to as a version 0.9 of things, where it's like, this is you should not take this as gospel, but this is something we're playing around with. Please play with us. Whenever you see a Kobold Cauldron on the blog, that's something that has a real good shot at being official content, but we could use a little more activity and playtesting around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the blog stuff, you all do not want to miss it. It is it is every day there is something new on there. It's good. It's just good.
It's not a small part of my day to make sure that blog is good and there every day.
And you knock it out of the park.
And trust us, we hear you when you're like, man, I love this goblin lineage. What do you mean it's not in the player's guide? We're hearing that, kids, loud and clear. Don't you worry. Don't you worry.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm a little stoic in how I sort of respond to things, but I read all the comments on the blog and I go to the Discord and I see people's comments there. I'm paying attention, and I'll tell you that it doesn't take a lot of voices to have opinions to sort of get us to pay attention. I think we recognize that, for every one person who talks, they represent a number of people who are not saying things out loud. So I love feedback. If you go to the blog, you can see I even leave negative comments up. I'll let you trash me. But I'd love to have it. So I know it's not cool here in 2024 to comment on blogs anymore. But stop by.
I think blogs are coming back.
Blogs are coming back.
Yeah.
Blogs are coming back. We'll bring them back. Another question here is, and for anyone who doesn't know, there are now a number the spellcasting classes are now tied to very specific arcane sources, which I think an amazing change because it makes the spell list way easier.
Yeah, solid choice. Celeste, once again, really smart.
Amazing choice. But one of our questions here, are there going to be any more weird casting classes or subclasses that we have planned for the future?
There are definitely big plans for, because right now Warlock is the only class that is strictly tied to the weird spellcasting list. So obviously we have a lot of opportunity. I know some of you in the Discord are starting to notice and we're getting some comments, but there is a lot of space left in the system to add things on. You might even notice why are the 20th level features? Why is it one bullet point for one feature? That bullet point is very intentional because perhaps there might be more options coming, right? There might be more. Heroic boons, their bullet point. You know how great it would be to add more and easy to that? right? And the way the modular system with the heritages and the lineages and these like subtypes, there's a lot of space left very intentionally for us to have cool places to go. And the weird spell list, obviously, you all are pointing out the where all this support. That just means that there's a big old space that we are absolutely playing in, and you can expect big things from.
And if you are a publisher looking to expand, these are places you could go too.
These are also ripe for you, yeah, as well.
Yeah.
The BFRD, this stuff is in here, and there is absolutely doors and platforms open, stages for new things to be built. That was a very important part of this foundation, making sure that it could be expanded and built in all manner of creative and interesting ways.
One of the things that I often say, I've been in the game business for a long time, and one of the things I often say, one of the unintentional geniuses of D&D, of what Gary made, was that you wanted to get in, and there was space to get in and sort of tinker and make your own thing. Like almost there was, I don't want to say all right, let me make sure I say the right thing. There was just lots of holes and lots of bits that you could look at and you could go, this could be better. And everybody has their own take on that. And so something we kind of did intentionally is that we left holes so that people could get in there and tinker and make their own spaces.
We wanted it to feel very invitational, I think, at other points. Like, and what I love and my favorite thing to see, especially in our Discord and TOV discussion, is when people are like, whoa, I love this. I've thought of 3 more subclasses immediately that I want to add because of this, because this one idea made them really excited about this, or this mechanic allowed them to think about this in a new way. That kind of stuff is the most exciting and most like best feedback a game designer could hope for, that people see their own creativity and vision in the game and how they could build on it.
Yeah, that's
best compliment ever to a game designer.
So
Absolutely.
Good. So good. Speaking of things that you all added to the game, we talked a little bit about downtime earlier, but I'm interested. What are you all's favorite downtime activity in TOV?
Do you have one, Jeff?
Yeah,
I have
do.
2. So
do.
so if you say mine, I can talk about the other one.
Okay, fair enough. So I am mostly the game master. I don't play very much, and so the one that I sort of enjoy encouraging my characters to employ is carousing, right? Which
that was one of mine I was going to say.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad I had 2.
Yeah. No, I like, and this is such a fine line, but I like mechanics for things that, for the most part, in the past, somebody would go, just talk it out, just role play it out. I mean, that's fun too, but having an actual game to play, putting the game in role-playing game is really interesting to me. I like it. And so whenever the players are like, let's go to the tavern, right? I'm like, okay, let's talk about downtime. Let's have some partying rules. I really appreciate having that. And my players have fun sort of messing around with that rule set.
My players have been really enjoying carousing, specifically for the contacts that they can make. It's helped me also like enlist them to make meaningful NPCs that they're getting more and more comfortable with as a resource. Like, oh, because in the tavern that one night I met that arcane scholar of monstology, and then like they're fighting a monster, and all of a sudden, hey, maybe I should talk to my contact. Like that thing occurs to them, and it's like, whoa, like that is so cool to see. So carousing was one that I was gonna pick. But my other favorite is, and maybe it's not the most glamorous, but training. Because boy, the training activity previously just seemed impossible. Like spending 52 weeks to like get a new skill proficiency or weapon proficient, like it was just a lot. So finding a new way to make that something that could work and actually feel meaningful. And what I like about it too, training, if you make a contact with carousing, you need to do that to get a trainer. That's like one of those ways that can like interact with each other. and then creating a table that allows you to speed up the process based on the rolls as you're going along. So like if you are exceptional, right, it's just like real life, you know, people learn things at different rates. Like some people are really fast. If you're just in there and you're wicked smart and you're learning how to do sleight of hand and it's just all working for you, all of a sudden you get that roll and, you know, you knock your time in half down all of a sudden, right? It's like you're looking at 26 weeks, and every time you roll that, like there's always the possibility of like, wow, you really succeeded a ton of weeks off the process. It actually makes it feel viable and like something that is possible, which I think is really exciting. And again, feeds back into making proficiencies in skills and tools and weapons matter a lot more in Tales of the Valiant. So this is one of those things that is just emphasizing that part of the game and working really nicely there.
In my game, one of my players wanted to learn Goblin. They picked up a Goblin along the way, and he's not a combatant, right? But he just sort of hangs out with the caravan, and he wants to learn Goblin so we can talk to the Goblin, and because the Goblin doesn't speak Common. And so you know, I'm like, certainly we have a system for this, and you know, he's on his way, right? And it's nice because there was no method for that previously. And so hooray for Tales of the Valiant.
Hooray for Tales of the Valiant.
Learn new things. Learn to be a better character. We can do it now. You can go to night school. Do it.
Amazing. Well, I think that's about as much time as we have for right now.
Wow.
An hour blew by. Just
I
like
can talk
that.
about this forever. I mean, you know,
I could
nerd life.
honestly.
In our second hour,
We're gonna take over the monster vault.
This is what the entirety of KoboldCon is now. But thank you both so much for all of your work on Tales of the Valiant, and also for answering some questions, maybe helping clear some things up, and generally just talking about this thing that I personally think is really cool. So thank you both so much, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you, Kendo. Thank you.
Of
Thank you all.
course. Yes. Coming up next, we're going to go on a quick break, go use the bathroom, get some water, whatever it is you need to do. And we will be coming back soon with another deep dive, but this time into the Monster Vault. So we will be back with you very shortly. See y'all.
all right. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
But here we are. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to KoboldCon 2024. Hey, I'm here with some amazing, amazing people who have helped make this. Make everything for Kobold Press, for Tales of the Valiant, but specifically the thing that we are talking about today is the Monster Vault. How does it feel? All three of you, all of this work that you've put in, well over a year's worth of work, finally out for everyone to experience. How's it feel?
Feels great. Yeah.
Yes,
Great.
at last we can babble about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to keep a lid on something that's pretty exciting like this, and everyone knows I'm a monsterholic, and it hasn't changed. And I have to say, Mark and Megan have enabled me, and the monsterholics among us. So it feels great. Yeah, Megan, what do you think? Are you just glad it's done and out there to share?
Yeah, it's mostly like this sense of anticipation for like the past few months, because printing's a long process. So just sitting here like waiting and waiting and waiting, and it's like they're gonna see it, they're gonna see it, they're gonna see it. Oh, it's out here. So it's been an exciting week for sure in the Kobold Warrens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, first and foremost, if we're getting into the Monster Vault, my first question for you is, what inspired the creation of the Monster Vault for Tales of the Valiant?
Ooh, I know this one. Uh, every time we finish doing a monster book, we say, wow, that was so hard. Tome of Beast, so hard. And we kind of walk away, right? And let the monsters explode and plunder the countryside. And that's great. We just like, yeah, okay. We won't do that again for a while. We've learned our lesson. And then someone says, yeah, but what if we did another one? And that's about all it takes for me to say, yeah, let's. And I turn to Mark and I say, 300 new monsters. We can illustrate that, right? We can get some artists.
I immediately get super excited and think, ugh,
That's a lot of monsters.
that's a lot of artists working with. Yeah. But yeah.
But I think for this one, I don't know, Megan, you can tell me if I'm wrong. But this one for Monster Vault, it was like back to basics, right? It's let's go do the classic monsters, put the Kobold spin on them. And for the history of the company, we've always depended on like other core monster books, right? Like you need an ogre, go over here. You need a dragon, go over there. But then we realized, oh, we're going to need to do this for Tales of the Valiant. We're going to need that core collection of goblins and dragons and orcs and kind of the regular stuff that you expect in your tabletop game, plus things that you don't expect. I don't know. What did you think, Megan? Like,
Yeah, like it's definitely fun to revisit some of those classics, right? And to go in and just be like, all right, so we need an ogre. But the fun thing about working with something like the SRD was that there was no lore, right? So for us, that meant that we got to go and like tackle these in a new way, right?
yes.
So it's not just an ogre anymore, right? Like it's not just an owl bear anymore. So that I think was the most fun, was just getting to like revisit a lot of the classics and explore something new with them.
Yeah.
And argue about what it should be.
Yeah. Well, we've all been playing a long time.
We
And
have,
so-
when we all have assumptions about, well, an ogre is kind of like this. No, an ogre is more like that. No, an ogre should be allowed to be like, a bouncer at the bar or whatever, like different ideas about what it really means to be the big smash 'em up guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those discussions were really fruitful because we kind of agreed mostly on the mechanical side. I think like that's SRD based, and 5th edition D&D shines through some of that, plus all the new stuff. I guess we'll get to that. But yeah, it was exciting.
Yeah. You all kind of like, you're talking about the ogre, but like, what are some of the other like classic fantasy monsters that people are going to be able to find in the Monster Vault? And like, what are some of those changes, not just mechanically, but also like aesthetically and like how like the art of those changed and how that informed each other.
There's a ton, but there's one that for me, I am a huge fan. My favorite adventure of all time is a first edition series, a trilogy called The Sinister Secret of Salt Marsh. Love that adventure. And in the final adventure, the big final enemy, spoiler alert for a 30-year-old adventure, are Sahuagin. I love, underwater stuff. I love Sahuagin. So one of the things I loved was kind of reinventing how they looked, get a
Oh,
cool,
yes.
make a little more sharky. Um,
Ooh.
so that was fantastic. I mean, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but there's something coming out where we do more with Sahuagin. But anyway, that was just one example of reinventing and putting a Kobold spin on something that I'm just giddy about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think in the alpha release, a lot of people got to see some of the new art and a lot of the new takes on things. Like the owlbear can now glide, right? We didn't give them a true flying speed, but they can be airborne.
They
Mm-hmm.
plummet with style and grace.
Right? Exactly. Well, Grace is about as graceful as a bear can be, I suppose. But I think some of the ones that people haven't seen yet, or they're just now diving into because Monster Vault's now out, I think the three big ones that are classics that we had a lot of fun with were giants, oozes, and hags.
Mm-hmm.
So, because a lot of those have, like, for hags, they had a pretty clear identity, but we kind of ramped that up to 11. And then for oozes, they had practically no identity. Oozes were, well, it's the gray one or the yellow one or the black one, which is not a lot of distinction when you're trying to pick a
color
creature.
is an identity a little bit. The
Right.
green
But
slime.
when you think yellow ooze, what do you immediately think the abilities would be? What ability does yellow give, right? So we definitely
Yeah.
wanted to change that up, give them some clear identities. And similarly with the giants, because a lot of the giants, at least in the SRD, were very similar. They all had a rock throwing attack. They all had a two-handed weapon. And then some of them could fly, some of them couldn't. And that's pretty much it. Some of them had a little bit of spell casting. So there wasn't in the mechanics itself, they didn't have clear identities. And so being able to revisit the lore allowed us to create those identities and then
Yes.
from those new identities, give them new mechanics related to it. So like the cloud giant, for example, doesn't throw a rock, it has a wind blast. Because what rocks are they holding up in the clouds? Right?
Rocks are heavy. It's hard to fly with a bag full of rocks.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And so now because they're the cloud giant and there's all this lore about how they have palaces up in the clouds, they now have abilities that tie into that. They can create clouds and they can make clouds solid, right? So now there's mechanics that support their lore of we walk on clouds for a living, right? It's not just they can do it just because they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's now stuff that supports it. So this little changes like that I think were the most fun.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off of that, another thing that I think are our dragons. Both.
Yes, I was going to get to dragons.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't say anything. Wolfgang, do you have any thoughts?
I do. Well, first of all, the art for the dragons is just stunning and beautiful. Like we
So-
shared the black dragon in the alpha, and everybody said, "Wow, what a great creature for the marsh or the swamp!" Like that black dragon is kind of badass.
And it looks like it belongs in a swamp too. That's the
Yep.
thing.
It's a little
Right.
more slithery. It's I don't know. I'm thrilled with all the dragon art we've got. And then we decided, well, primary colors, yellow's not in there. What if we put in a new one, right? The Monster Vault shouldn't just be the classic chromatics. Let's add something new. And the Void Dragon is kind of iconic for Kobold Press. Why don't we just put it in the Monster Vault so
And
everyone's
it looks
got it?
cool.
It
You
looks
know,
looks
so
cool.
cool.
It
It
You,
looks
you
so
gotta keep that art because it's awesome.
Yes, and we've done visually, Mark. I think the artists all delivered, and I know there were only one or two people doing dragons, but wow. But then on top of that, right, like the lore behind it and the abilities behind them, some of it's familiar, like types of breath weapons. We didn't say change all that. But the green dragon, for instance, I think I went back and forth a little on the lore. Like at one point, it was sort of a mad scientist, full stop. And then now it's a little more like an alchemist, I want to say, right? Like they still have some experimenting and they're curious. And it's like, well, if green dragons are curious creatures that like to experiment and brew up potions full of halfling guts, well, that makes them interesting, right? It's it's a
Instead
quirk
of
we
just, they're green because they live in the forest, obviously.
right. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with green lives in the forest. That's still there, but it's nice to talk a little about motivation. Like, if dragons all have curiosity, if dragons all have hobbies and interests, what are those like? And what kind of trouble do they make? Because they just need another batch of halfling guts, right? Like, it's for an experiment. Don't you people understand? I'm digging up the Shire for a reason,
For a
And you
reason.
guys can't see it because you only live like 50 years. I am operating on a grand scale over here.
Yeah.
right? So
The
that
other fun
lore
thing with the, oh,
is
sorry.
fun. I think it inspires adventures, right? I
Yeah.
think it gives them personality and a twist. And if you're the game master and you're trying to represent that dragon, it gives you a few more hooks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and mechanically, we also wanted each dragon to feel different, right? Because dragons, you can't get away from claw bite, right? Like dragons, it's always going to be claw bite and a breath weapon. But we did want to give them a little bit clearer identity in their mechanics as well. So each one has a new passive ability, at least at the higher ages. Wormlings are all still similar, but wormlings
They're
all
so
have,
cute.
Especially the
but
yellow
all the
dragon
wormlings
wormling. I love
now,
him.
yes, they're adorable. And they're scattered all throughout the book too. So you guys got to go find all the wormlings. It's great. But they'll pounce at you, which that's the thing. One of the new mechanics for the wormlings is they all have this pounce. So when they're really little, they're very lion-like. They're going to be like stalking and wherever they're stalking, and then they're going to come out and jump at you. But when they get bigger, they don't really need to worry as much about I'm hiding in tall grass and jumping on you. I'm big, I don't care. So their new passive feature when they get older is tied to their breath weapon. So for some of them, if their breath weapon is not available, because 5e gives us this recharge mechanic,
Mm-hmm.
which allows us to have a lot of fun playing with it. So in the recharge, when this breath weapon is available, some dragons have this like the red dragon has this like aura of heat because all of this heat and magma and stuff is built up inside of its body. So then you're getting burned just by being near it. And then that goes away if it uses its breath weapon. So that adds a little bit of tacticalness for the game master. And then on the flip side, some of the dragons have this aura only when the breath weapon hasn't been used. So
Mm-hmm.
then the game master, depending on what that aura is incentivized to use the breath weapon more often. So you get this fun little tactical, and then sometimes the players have to stay away from the dragon and hit it from afar. Sometimes they want to be close to it and come in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it has just that extra little layer, which I
Yeah.
Yeah.
think makes them extra fun.
Yeah. Like it's. I mean, everything about that, like, just inspires so much, right? There's like so much that you can pull from that, either in the tactics of combat or like even like as Wolfgang was saying, like in the story of it, like in giving them like clear identities, almost like feels even more like if you wanted to do a game where you were like monster hunting or whatever, and you were building a codex, a vault of monsters, one would say, it's like giving you clear identities of like, okay, we're at this town, there's some stuff going on, what are the clear signs of things that are happening, and what
Mhm.
monster could we align that to like help us prepare for, like, okay, we now know that there's this, oh, there's clear signs of like experimentation and like weird like alchemical uses, but also big claw marks and stuff. Maybe we're looking at a green dragon that's in the area or something. Like that's so cool.
Right?
That's I
And it
love
also
that.
encourages more researching too, because we have in the player's guide, we have the researching downtime. So it gives more of a
Mm-hmm.
reason for that, right? If you know more about the monster, you can kind of see the signs in the area, and then you can go in with that knowledge. So it's easier, not necessarily easier to fight, but you know what to expect.
You're more
Yeah,
informed. Yeah.
that's so good. So we've been talking about a lot of classic monsters, right? We've been talking about dragons and
Sure.
ogres and goblins and so on and so forth. Are there any new monsters that people can look forward to seeing in there? Anything like any fantasy, maybe science fantasy? Like what new stuff can people be excited for?
Yes, bunches. A lot.
Too much?
Um, well, no. I mean, we put in the Yellow Dragon and the Void Dragon as sort of classic fantasy monsters that fit a niche not covered by the existing dragon types. But we also put in a section that's a little more science fantasy, sort of a couple of robot creatures, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
um,
And mechadrons.
and the Mechadrons, which are again sort of robotic, little mechanical creatures that have a grand vision and a grand plan, and no one understands it but them. Which is fun. And they've got this very clear hierarchy from, sort of the very simple mechadrons up to um, a mechadron prime, which is missing. Anyway, there's the lore parts of that.
So missing, or is it just temporarily omitted?
Yeah, well, it's not, there's
Or
no
released
stats for it.
maybe at some point in the future.
I know, right? Like, yeah, we can't get too far ahead of ourselves, but it does seem like the search for the Mechadron Prime might be a thing someday.
Ooh, okay. All right.
Maybe someday soon. There's hints of this actually in the Guide to the Labyrinth. So that's where some of this other lore comes from, which isn't a monster book. It's sort of talking about the assumed setting of Tales of the Valiant. But there's a section in there about the Mechadrons and what they're up to. And it's like a couple of paragraphs. But additional hints about where some of those monsters fit in the grand scheme. Do you have a new monster you like, Megan?
Oh goodness, I hate it when people ask my favorites.
Oh, sorry.
It's
I'm
like
just gonna
they're
put you
all
on
of
the
my
spot.
children because I have
I
had to
know.
Yeah.
work with all of them.
I nominate the Chull. Is that how you say them?
Oh, the
Joel, yes.
Yeah, just the art. I love the art for them, and they're so bizarre. It's like a whole.
the
Yeah.
ooze fiends.
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, okay. Wait,
Yeah,
please describe. Wait, what? What? You can't just.
They're
You just can't.
sort of, well, you know how cave fish are invisible and you can see their bones, right? Now imagine a demon that's kind of like that. They're semi-transparent. They're opaque, not opaque. They're
Yeah, just imagine evil gummy bears.
yes.
They don't look
with
quite that
weapons.
cuddly.
Yeah, the art. Yeah, that was one of those ones where when I first got the art briefs and I was reading, I'm thinking, oh, okay,
We're making the artist's life
this
hard.
is. But then when the art started coming back, I was like, oh, okay, no, that's awesome.
Oh,
So
that's-
yeah, I love them.
Right?
Yeah,
They're a
they're
new
more
category
like
of fiends.
Yeah.
mercenaries and stuff of the plane. So they're like, you pay us, we'll switch sides. It's great.
Right.
Oh my god.
What is that saying from Fall? If the caps are there, we do not care.
You've been playing so much fun.
I have been perhaps a little. I blame that TV show. But I mean, stuff like that, the robots I mentioned earlier, I think there's like a little warden robot as well, right?
Ooh.
There's stuff that is Fallout adjacent. There's no radioactive rad scorpions or anything, but there's a lot of monsters crammed into the monster vault.
Over
Yeah, we try to
400?
make sure that the lore stayed open enough so that they could apply to any world as long as the world was assumed to be fantasy. So there's different types of fantasy. There's high fantasy, low fantasy. You mentioned science fantasy earlier, right? So we wanted to make sure that the lore was open enough that you could see this creature in your world, right? Or in a world that you wanted to play in. And the mechanics typically reflect that, mostly because the mechanics are very much about reinforcing the creature's theme. So as long as your world features the biome that creature would normally be found in, right? Then you should be fine. Now, if a creature that has, like the Grick, for example, is an underground creature with stone camouflage. If you don't have anything underground in your world, maybe the Grick doesn't fit as well. But otherwise, that would be like the only limit to something like the Grick is that you have to conceivably have an underworld or an underground area that they could be in. But otherwise, most of the creatures can be easily placed into any type of fantasy world.
Yeah.
There's also some really cool new planar stuff like the Astral Devour, things like that, which is some
Yeah, on the total opposite of the big planar stuff, Mark, is the new monsters that might slide by you if you're not paying attention. We added sort of leveled up versions of some of the humanoid baddies, right? Like there's is it the Hobgoblin General or Conjurer?
Yeah, there's a commander and a conjurer for the Hobgoblin.
Right,
the
which
bugbear has
that Bugbear Champion.
Yeah,
right?
champion, that's what it was.
Which is like it's just sort of a leveled up bugbear, but goodness, you don't want to get on its wrong side. And so it's it's kind of expanding the range of challenge for a creature like a bugbear or a group of hobgoblins by putting in some leaders, some champions, um,
A lot of times
additional,
spellcasters.
yeah, spellcasters for these. So those are additions to the Monster Vault. Like they're not a new concept. Like Hobgoblin isn't new, but the Commander and the Conjurer are.
Just like we can't not talk about the kobolds. You know,
Yes,
we have a kobold witch and a kobold. I can't think what all they are. I think there's
Mechanist.
a mechanist.
Mechanist.
Yeah, so yeah, it's not just kobold.
Yep.
Well, of course, there's no such thing. It's just a
well,
kobold.
and like Wolfgang said, it kind of expands how long you can use these creatures, right? So instead of, oh yes, Kendo.
Oh no! Please continue. Please continue.
Okay. So instead of it being like Goblin is only what your level 1 players face, right? Now Goblin can be something that's a threat to level 3 or even level 5. Just because they've got the Goblin Captain, and then because Goblins work with things like Bugbears and Hobgoblins, you could have an entire level 1 to 10 campaign that's very Goblin focused and Goblin themed with all of these various Goblinoids that we've added in, right? I know the lizard folk is another one that got that same treatment.
Yes.
So now you can have an entire village of lizard folk that's not just here's the one stat block, right? Like now you've got like a chieftain and you've got like a shaman, right? Like you've got these other peoples that would populate that area.
That's
Yeah,
so good. It's so good. It's just so good. What else can I say other than it's so good?
It is. The deeper you dig into it, the more you scratch at it, like the more you see, oh, this is good.
There's just so much. There's just so much there to build off of. As like again, as I will keep talking about, as a forever game master, stuff like this, and like just being able to flip through the book, find any monster, even just reading through its lore and just going, oh, okay, now I have a million ideas of like how to use this and how to like. I'm so excited.
I had that experience so many times doing the layout for the book. I was intimately familiar with the art, but then as I was going through, I don't know how many times I would just sort of stop and go, oh, that's cool. Then, I have to go back to work. Then I go a little more, then I get to a new creature, and I start reading it. Oh, wow, how cool is that? Oh, anyway, get back to work. The entire book, I just kept thinking, ooh, that's really nice.
That's my fault. I'm sorry, Wolfgang. I'm sorry.
Moving on, like, so we're talking about like all of these amazing monsters, right? What are some of your favorite unique features that you've brought to some of the monsters, either new monsters or old monsters that, like, I don't know, so something that you find yourself particularly like inspired by, if there are any?
Oh, there's a couple from the alpha that I was fond of, and I'm sure Megan and Mark have different ones, but making petrification a weakness for trolls was a fond addition of mine from the alpha, and I think it's made it through to the current printing. Because it's an old bit of Scandinavian lore and it shows up in Lord of the Rings, and trolls turning to stone is fun. I would often house rule it before, but now with Tales of the Valiant and the Monster, I don't have to house rule it. It's right there.
It's just a part of the
right?
game now.
It's just part of the game. And it's not every troll is subject to petrification, but they could be. And in my game, it's probably more likely than not, right? And another one was the giving skeletons a ranged attack. I think they have. So when I think of skeletons, I think of Ray Harryhausen and that sort of stop motion animation from that era of very old movies where we didn't have a lot of CGI.
Jason
Clash of the Titans was
Argonauts,
awesome,
right?
okay?
Right, but Clash of the Titans was awesome, and it's like, okay, and was it Jason and the
I think it's.
Argonauts?
I saw a clip of that very scene of him fighting the skeletons earlier today.
Right, and it's still kind of terrifying. They move in this awful, awful way. Like, no, that's not a living thing. That's a skeleton, and it's moving. Make it stop. So our skeletons got a little bit of an upgun, and they're the wimpiest little thing, right? Like, what do you fight as a beginning adventurer? Well, rats, skeletons, maybe some goblins.
There's
And
a
I think
skeleton archer.
the skeleton archer, right?
Which
Like
is
suddenly
cool.
they're a ranged threat.
Yeah, yeah.
So little things like that can take something pretty straightforward and just give it a little more variety. I love that stuff.
Yeah, and the skeleton's got a new counterattack too that I think keys off of their hit points, or it has a recharge. I think it might have a recharge. So every now and then you might be like, oh, it's a skeleton archer. I'll just shoot it, and then it can hit you back with its bow.
Yes.
That's the scary part. You think you're hiding over here away from the skeleton. You're not safe.
You're not safe. It saw
You're
that
not
arrow
safe.
coming.
That's so good. And it's like, and it's something like, yeah, could you just make a skeleton, give it a bow? Sure. But like, it's the extra oomph that really, really helps bring it together.
And I know you talked in the about the player's guide and probably people saying, here heroes get all these options. Oh, this is so great for character building. And here we are talking about the Monster Vault saying, yeah, you're going to need those. Because the monsters are a little meaner or have more options too.
Yeah.
One of the things I like is about the book too, and it's not even an art thing. You know, usually monster books are basically an encyclopedia of monsters. That's pretty much it. But in the Monster Vault, there's a whole first section which is counter building and just like all kinds of really cool guidance before you even get to the first, to the aboleth, which is the first creature. But I will bring it back to art. I love in that section the 2-page spread thing we did that shows the sizes. An example.
Yes,
I love
the size
that.
chart is fantastic.
Yeah, from I think Pixie or Sprite all the way up to Gargantuan Dragon. But just seeing that visually represented is so helpful. I love that piece. But that's in that whole section, which I think is just so invaluable. I think GMs are going to just love that first section.
Yeah, that leads us into the next question. What are the tools in the Monster Vault that are there to help game masters create encounters using the monsters in it, and like what kind of guidance does it provide as far as like how to build an encounter, how to all of that good stuff that game master, especially newer game masters, have a hard time with when they first start.
Yeah, so chapter 1, we have some really great just how to build an encounter, essentially. So like that section Mark was talking about was basically how do you use monsters and why, right?
Yes.
Is the questions that we answered in those first 3 chapters. Well, the chapter 2 is explaining the stat block mostly, but chapter 1 tells you about how to build an encounter, and we get a table of encounter benchmarks. So based on your character's level, based on what kind of creatures you want to throw at them, what the maximum CR that your players can handle, how you should kind of put CRs together to create an encounter so that you're not murdering murdering characters. We don't murder players. You're not murdering characters.
That's a future book.
Right? Yeah, sure. I mean, some of the books are big enough. You probably
You probably could. It's a 2-3 pound
But,
book. But I mean, that stuff is incredibly useful for beginners, but honestly, going through it reminded me, oh yeah, there is a way to sort of gauge difficulty, and we've spent a lot of time over many years at Kobold Press thinking about challenge rating and encounter difficulty, and a bunch of that is distilled in this chapter as examples and rules of thumb, and here's how far you can push before you're likely to just wipe everybody out, right? Like there's some good guidance there about which monsters play well with other monsters. And if you're just like, I want to do something with undead, but I'm kind of, tapped out for ideas, you can just go read the undead section and say, oh yeah, hey, that's neat.
That's neat.
yeah,
So-
and that's the chapter. The 3rd chapter talks about breaks down by type. So yeah, the first chapter has encounter, and 3rd chapter, and that's what you're talking about, Wolfgang, with the section about undead that explains like what an undead is, where you normally find them. So it gives you a little bit more guidance on what the difference between a monstrosity and a humanoid is, right? Or a monstrosity and a beast, but then also gives you examples of where they might be found, how you might want to use them in your game, right? Like the average elephant probably isn't wandering the plains, right? The average beast is like, you know what? Magic's kind of scary. I'm not going to be near that, right? So they're going to be in areas that aren't covered in magical things. But then if you've got a magical rift to a plane, well, now you might find some of these planar creatures, right? And that it gives you some examples of like terrain and stuff that you can use, and even has examples of encounters that might occur in specific types of terrain.
Yeah, and allies. I mean, terrain is nice, but I feel pretty comfortable saying, I think I know that a bear will appear in the woods or the mountains. But what might be with the bear? Well, an ogre or a hill giant, right? Like some of those combinations and connections are fun too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think that's great, especially if you're just looking to noodle on some new things. Um, Often just flipping through the monster section will do it, but sometimes you're trying to build something more complicated or more, I don't know, a little richer, a little deeper, or just something that your players won't expect because they know all your GMing tricks. Um, Use some of our tricks. We're kobolds.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in
We got plenty of them.
the ally section you're talking about, we have tables for each of the creature types now that lists all the creatures,
Yes.
but then yes, lists like groups of allies. So now you know like what kind of creatures typically hang out with this creature, right? So you can kind of build those encounters so it isn't just here's a pile of undead, I guess, right? Now you've got some undead and some other stuff all together.
Which one is it? I always get this wrong. Is it the Wraith or the White that is the lieutenant to necromancers? I love
White,
that.
the white is it's the
It's the
CR3
White.
lieutenant.
I love that lore change because
Yes.
I just ran a giant necromancer campaign and I needed lieutenants, and now it's sort of in there officially like these guys, they're good at hurting other undead and getting them to do what the villain needs them to do, right? It gives them an additional role that's fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we definitely took a lot of the lore pieces and just ramped them up to 11, like some creatures that kind of had a little bit of like we think it kind of works this way and it's like no, we're going to definitely say it totally works this way. You know, like the shadow can now attach to somebody's shadow, right? You
Oh,
know, it can jump off of a wall and hide in their shadow and hang out with them for a bit, right? That's
It's
its like one
mechanically
bonus action,
supported.
yes.
right? It's like, all right, well, I'm just gonna hang out for a bit and then I'm just gonna hit you because you're right here, right? Why not?
That's
I think
so good. I love the shadow. One of my favorite monsters personally. And I'm very excited
right.
to hear that.
And they now, I think, have spider climb that previously didn't. So like shadows couldn't actually be on walls previously, and I was like, that makes no sense. So they actually now can be on a wall.
Mm-hmm.
Which they always should have been, but yeah, nobody thought that through. Actually, I think Ettercap also picked up
Spider
some
climb, yes, because it
spider
previously
climb.
didn't. And the art on the Ettercap is amazing. It looks so much more spidery, and I love it. Like it actually looks like it should be hanging out with spiders.
There's a
Right?
wrong book, but Game Master's Guide. There's a new Ettercap illustration where it's coming down at you like from above, and it's
Oh,
Doing the spider climb thing.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's really cool.
oh, I
Spoiler
love
for the
that.
Game Master Guide. But I
Yep.
mean, I think those sorts of small mechanical changes can have a real nice effect in the way you stage an encounter and
Mm-hmm.
in just how much you scare your players. I mean, good scared, but scared.
But scared.
It's doing what? It's hanging from the ceiling. I thought only vampires could do that. No.
No,
It's no
no.
longer hanging from the ceiling; it's dropping on you.
Yes. Roll for
It was hanging
initiative.
on the ceiling. You failed your perception, so
And here we
Right.
are.
yeah.
It's so good. Um, now we've talked about all of the tools and stuff that like you've added onto monsters, right? And like some of
Sure.
the guidance for game masters to be able to run them. One of the great things about TOV is a new mechanic given to GMs to allow them a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more, another tool in their pocket to help make encounters maybe just that much more dangerous. And that's the Doom mechanic.
Hey.
Would you like to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so Doom had a handful of different iterations during our playtest. For a while, it was an extra resource on monsters, which ultimately playtest was like, I don't need to keep track of layer actions and legendary actions and recharge and Doom on top of all of this. So, you know, it's a fair point, right? Game masters have a lot to keep track of. They don't want to have to also keep track of point pools on each individual. So Doom, some of the changes we made is that Doom is now just an optional resource. And it's also a player, or not a player, a game master side resource. So
Yep.
it's these points that you as a game master have based on the level of the encounter. And then you can use them for a variety of things. You can use them for, I have the list somewhere. Yes. You can use them to give a creature advantage on an attack roll. So if your player's like, you've got your fighter that's wearing plate, and that dragon's like, I just cannot hit this tin can. Well, now you can use a point to give them advantage, right? You can also give disadvantage to a PC on a save if you want. You're
I
like,
love
this
that
guy
one.
keeps
I
passing.
love that one so much.
Right?
I
This
really
guy
want
keeps
this guy to
passing.
be charmed so bad by the
Right?
vampire. I'm spending the point.
Right? That cleric is too hardy. You need to fail this save. And then the third thing is, once per encounter, you can let a creature recharge an ability automatically. So if you really want the dragon to breathe fire twice in a row, you can. You have to spend one of your points to do it, but you can totally do that. And so those are the three core aspects of Doom. And then going into the Game Master's Guide, which we spoke of briefly, we have some expanded options of other things you can spend it on. And Doom, although it is very monster focused, it can be used in any encounter, right? Where anytime that you would call for initiative and do round by round, giving players disadvantage against a trap or something like that, you still can use it outside of monsters.
But that's where it started, right? It started as a way to say, kind of like legendary actions or abilities that recharge. It was meant to be a little bit of a power up on the GM side, or an option to heighten the tension or the suspense, or just say, well, this is it, right? We're going for it. I'm spending my Doom point on this breath weapon, or the Lich really doesn't want you to make this save, so with disadvantage.
And the great thing about it being optional is that it allows a game master to kind of tailor the encounter to the players. So if you know that your players are not very optimized, they're just kind of there they're like, I kind of
if you just don't want to keep
sometimes.
track of it, right? Like if you're like,
Right.
that's all fun, but these monsters have plenty, and I'm just a beginning game master. I don't need to keep track of Doom. There's really, it's frosting. It's a cherry on top. It's not required.
Yeah.
But it's definitely great for those players that they optimize everything. They got to be like, all right, I'm rolling up in here. I got a 25 AC DM. What are you doing, right? It's like, well, I have Doom now. So,
and also, what's your will save?
Right?
And I think that it being optional also allows for game masters to pick and choose which encounters they want to use it in. Maybe you save it for big boss fights, or a very particular kind of thing. It's such a versatile thing that I think a lot of the ways in which you can use Doom points that you're talking about were things that game masters were probably already doing, just behind the screen, okay, I need to balance this encounter on the fly, right? But now you've given it cold, hard mechanics that are both player and game master facing now, so that when a player goes, man, why does this thing keep happening? The GM can go, well, it's happening because of this. You did this, I got this, I spent it, and now this is happening. And that kind of fun back and forth that I think is will feel good for game masters, but probably also feel a little better for players now that it is both facing both directions, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it definitely has some fun interplay with luck, right? So it's not just the players that get a fun new extra points if things don't go their way. Because there are times, every game master, you sit there and you whiff every roll, right? This thing just cannot hit a single player at all, right? And sometimes you really just need that advantage. Just be like, before this creature dies, please let it do some damage.
Let it do one cool thing. That's all I want.
Cool thing. I've definitely had encounters where I've had big bad, everything is going right. The player does one thing that is a concentration roll that just stops them from doing anything for the rest of the encounter. It's well,
right?
There goes that.
This was the silence spell on a I think it was a Tome of Beast Lorelei. It was some sort of siren. Really? You pulled out the silence spell for this encounter? All right. And they just walked all over it, right? It's all the Sonic stuff was toast.
You've been looking forward to that encounter as the GM all day.
I was they're on a ship. They're sailing down the coast. I'm going to be luring sailors off the boat to their watery doom.
This is going to be so cool. Silence.
Okay.
Great.
Well,
great. All right.
Thanks,
I did not
guys.
see that coming. I haven't seen you pull that out in a very long time.
Yeah.
I forgot you had that spell. Amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
speaking of spells, though, for players, if people want to know a secret, now don't tell anybody else.
It's
oh,
But
just, yeah.
because, right, just between
But
us,
here at KoboldCon, we can
here at
share.
KoboldCon.
right, because we've added all of these bonus actions and reactions to a lot of the creatures, there's a third circle spell that might get more use now than Fireball, and that's slow. Because
Yes.
slow limits you to just an action or a bonus action. And now that monsters have multiple things that they can do, now instead of it being like you slow the monster and well, I'll still just use multi-attack and claw bite you. It's like now it's like I can claw bite, or I can do my cool bonus action, or I can do my reaction. Or actually with slow, I think it removes your reaction. So now, like I think slow is going to be much more impactful on games.
Yep.
And so for the wizards that prefer utility spells or like to have those kind of things like silence and stuff and taking that instead of like scorching ray or whatever, right? Like now you can take those utility things and still have a huge impact on the combat.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I didn't even think about that. That's
Right? You're going to find a few quirks in there, the way the Monster Vault and Player's Guide interact.
so good. Um, as we're moving on to like kind of our final questions here, if there are any, we're running a little short on time, so we'll try to get one or two questions from the chat. So if you have any, please send them. Make sure they're great. Um, but let's talk a little bit about the accessibility of the Monster Vault, because with some old classic monsters and a lot of new monsters, right? There's gonna come a little bit of like, okay, how do I use these? What are these? All of that good stuff. There's the introduction of the pronunciation key for the monsters, and then art descriptions in the PDF. How do all of these come together to help make the Monster Vault much more usable for people?
So the fun thing about making things like Tome of Beasts and Creature Codex is that as the editor developer on a lot of those, I just know how to spell it. I don't need to know how to pronounce it. And then people are like, so how do you say this? I'm like, I don't know. I know how to spell it. Well, so then we made a pronunciation key because we get asked that a lot. And you know, the more unique monsters that you put out there, especially because a lot of monsters are based off of like folklore and things like that, you want to be able to pronounce it correctly or at least do some justice to it. So the pronunciation keys, we added those. So in those tables we were talking about earlier in the creature type section
Yep.
that include like their allies and everything, that's also where the pronunciation key is housed. So now you can just, now you know how to say the name, right? And it's all spelled out for you, which is great. And yeah, that's, for us, it's just a fun thing to do because we get asked, but it's also a very good accessibility tool, like you're talking about, Kendo, that it helps people who might not necessarily have English as their first language or something like that, right? It helps them pronounce the monsters.
The most important pronunciation thing is it's Dro, not Drow.
What?
For some
Menser
of the
himself-
monsters,
Wait,
Frank
actually?
Manser himself told me that when I was 12, so I will go to my grave and I will fight anyone.
You're taking Frank's word for it, are you?
Frank knew Gary. It was Dro. So all you Drow fans,
I believe
sorry
it.
to say it, you're wrong.
well, good news is for some of the monsters that do have multiple popular pronunciations, both pronunciations are listed in the key.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Drow and Dro are listed for
Is-
that creature in the pronunciation key. So we got both.
Gith Yankee and Gith Yankee.
Yep. Well, I mean, we don't
Ganassi
have
and
good names,
Janassi.
but
Yeah, but
Potato,
yeah.
potato.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of all of the pronunciation arguments I've been in over the
Yep.
years of like.
Exitsachitl.
And we, you know, we don't want to
Let's
say
do.
100% it's pronounced this way, so we give you options, right? Like everybody's got their camp on the pronunciations. It was a really fun key to make actually, because I'm originally from the South and I put together a lot of the pronunciations. So I made sure that we had several team members look over it so that it wasn't too Southern sounding in some of the pronunciation.
It's a bit more
But I was
varied.
using the correct stuff, so that's great. And then you mentioned the art descriptions in the PDF. That I think came about from PAX Unplugged 2019. We had a couple come up to the booth and they asked if our PDFs were screen reader friendly and accessible. And me, being relatively new to all of this, was like, I don't know, maybe, possibly. So, and then I discovered that no, they're not. So thank you, wherever you may be, if you're still even paying attention to Kobold Press, because that kind of prompted us to start looking at what does it mean for us to make our PDFs more screen reader friendly, to make them more accessible. And a lot of times it's just as simple as making sure that we've got like a one sentence description on each of the monster art, right? So that you've got the screen reader can read out what the monster looks like, or describing like what the half page picture is, right? And it's stuff that um, those of us that don't use screen readers don't even think about. But it makes a big difference for the people that do use them. And it's a relatively small lift on us, and it just makes it so much better.
Yeah. And sometimes they work as captions because you're like, what is that art?
Right?
Yeah. It's just more useful for everyone, regardless.
Yep.
Yeah, generally. I mean, it's kind of like putting subtitles on TV and video, right? Like I pretty much just watch films with subtitles on because the audio is sometimes so muddy, or someone's running the leaf blower, and I'm just like, whatever, subtitles, it's fine. It's just one more channel, which is nice to have.
Amazing. Well, we are here in the. I don't see any questions.
No big questions? Oh, okay. That's easy. We did everything perfectly.
We did everything perfectly. So I will ask my final question. Are there any plans to release additional content for the Monster Vault in the future?
Ooh. I know secret plans to release more Monster Vault stuff. I don't know how much I can talk about.
Kobold Press is known for monster books. We've done Tome of Beast 1, Tome of Beast 2, Tome of Beast 3. So, nope. No more monsters.
No more monsters.
We're done.
No
We're
more
monstered out forever.
Right.
The Monster Vault is the shining pinnacle of monsters.
We've done every single monster there ever could be.
I think, like I said earlier, we've done a great big lift on Monster Vault. We're really happy and excited about it, and we'd like to put monsters down for a little while. But we're coming back. Yes. I think I heard this from an editor that there was some interest in taking some creatures from the Monster Vault and turning them into, I don't know, expanded blog stuff, or doing something around those monsters in the Game Master Guide, but that's all I know. I don't know. Megan probably knows more.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind is that if because with Tales of the Valiant, it just released, but it is only 2 books, right? If you are hungry for more than the 403 monsters that are in that book, we do still have Creature Codex, Tome of Beast 1, Tome of Beast 2, Tome of Beast 3, and they are all compatible, right? We are 5e compatible, and we released the conversion guide today for 5e to 2e. So if you feel the need to convert,
for free.
Yeah, it's a free conversion guide.
Should have charged for that, Megan. Should have charged $20.
No,
that stuff's gold. I read it. It's really useful.
Yeah, it is, and so because they're compatible with each other, you don't have to do any conversion if you don't want to, and the guide clearly states that. But it does give you some guidance on doing conversions if you did want to grab one of the monsters from our other monster books and use that in your game. Super quick, super easy.
There are a lot of mimics. Those mimics need to come over. Like, we've got the baseline mimic. But you know me, I always want 30 more mimics. That's why.
Do you?
Okay, maybe I don't. Maybe I'm mimicked out.
A lot of people like the carnivorous ship, okay?
The carnivorous ship is hilarious and deserves to be in every pirate adventure ever.
It spits cannonballs. I mean, it's mostly just the undigested metal that it eats from eating ships, but it spits cannonballs.
If I had used the mimic ship instead of a siren, that silent spell
would not
have been so effective.
It wouldn't have been.
You don't hear the cannonballs being spit at you. All right.
Right.
There actually.
Did we have some more questions?
Yes, we did have some more questions. So we'll go through these real quick. First question here. Are there any lore connections to Midgard for any of the monsters in the Monster Vault? Or are they all primarily within the labyrinth?
They are. This is
not directly, no.
Yeah, this is very much any world, your world. It's not a Midgard product by any means. I think it's fair to say that things like the Void Dragon started as Midgard flavored monsters. but they've sort of expanded and gotten out in the world, and but everything in the Monster Vault fits into Midgard pretty well.
Yeah, because all the lore is much more open. You know, it really can fit in any world. So yeah, everything. If you play in Midgard, you could definitely use all these monsters in Midgard. But as far as saying this monster is specifically in this region of Midgard, no, the Monster Vault does not include any of that.
And just before anyone says it, because I know there's tons of Midgard fans, that does not mean we're abandoning Midgard. Midgard is still very much alive. More Midgard is coming. I see it all the time. People say, like, is Midgard gone? No.
No, no.
Not at
Every
all.
Monday on the blog, we talk about Midgard. Every editorial meeting, we're like, well, is this a Midgard thing? Right. There are just this past January, we put out that big Warlock Grimoire, which is
Spoilers?
100%
Oh yeah, the Grimoire.
Midgard. Grimoire is 100% Midgard content. So yes, it continues, and I think in future products that will be a thing. But as the core rules, we really wanted to keep it open and universal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Next question here. How significant is the difference between the creatures in the Monster Vault, like the Duergar, Dwarves, Deep Gnomes, and Kobolds, from the versions of them in the Player's Guide? Or are they similar?
So it depends on which aspect you're talking about, because we did have to create all new lore for all of them. So we definitely created a lot of lore that made them more unique. For example, the Duergar have lore about them being much more militaristic as a society, like they're martial law ruled. And they spend a lot of their time in the depths of the world fighting off aberrations and other things that go bump in the night. So they have lore related to that. As far as mechanical differences, every creature got at least one new cool thing. That was one of our big goals when we were looking at all the monsters, is all the SRD monsters got at least one cool new thing. Usually it was a bonus action or a reaction, but sometimes it was just as simple as, now the rust monster can climb on walls. Why couldn't it before? I don't know, but now it can, right?
Right.
You know, it is simple little changes like that that make the monsters more versatile for your environments. But yeah, so each of those that you listed did get changes, but they should not play over like super different.
Right. But part of
most of
that
the
question was
changes
about
were-
the player's guide. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Like kobolds in the Monster Vault versus the player's lineage.
Versus the player lineage of Kobold. And I mean, they line up neatly, but obviously one's for players and one's for monsters. So
There's some, yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's
a
distinctions.
lot of tabletop RPGs, or specifically in our type of tabletop RPG, are a bit asymmetrical. If y'all are familiar with the style of asymmetrical gaming, so stat blocks are going to be a little different. Now, the Kobold does have scurry in both instances,
Right? They
right?
have
The Kobold,
connections.
yeah, so they do look like the same creature. They're not super different. But as far as what a game master would use a kobold for versus what a player would use a kobold for are going to be different. So some of their mechanics are different. They should still feel like the same creature.
I think they absolutely do, but yeah, different sides of the table.
Understood. And then I think our last question here is, did any of the creatures receive the Vorpal crit ability? Always fun when a character can lose a hand.
I don't remember a Vorpal crit.
I don't think so. I know that we've put some out in some of our other monster books that have like a you lose a limb or something
You
on
lose a
crit.
limb, but I think you got to go to Tomo Beast for that.
Yeah.
It's too bad we're not ever going to do another monster book. Or we could,
No more monster
That could be
books.
Right, or
something
we
in
could
a
bring that
future
back.
Bad.
No, we don't have that, but there are other things that are certainly in there and horrifically horrifying. I'm not sure which ones survived playtest, but you know, look at the purple worm, look at the rust monster. There are things that will make you say, "Oh." Some of the names are familiar, I'd say, but Megan was saying there are new bonus actions, there are reactions, there are twists on the old familiar, so you know most of it, but there's always one thing you might not know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as so if your desire for something Vorpal is because you want something post combat that kind of lasts and lingers, we do have several creatures that have curses and diseases and things like that. So it's not just a one and done type thing with the creature. We do have some creatures that linger, assuming that would be the main purpose of I want Vorpal because I want them to have something that lasts past the encounter. There are plenty of curses and diseases that help you out with that.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for being here, answering these questions, diving into the Monster Vault. I know I'm very excited to dive through it, pull out some of my favorite ones, and I hope all of you watching feel the same. Thank you all for watching, and Kobold Con's not done yet. We still got plenty more to do.
Yes.
But yes,
thanks for all the great questions. It's been fun talking about monsters. You basically can't shut me up. So
I saw someone earlier saying that they love watching your face light up whenever you get to talk about monsters.
It's my favorite thing. So this is my favorite part of so many favorite parts.
But yes.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Hey, who would I be if I didn't invite the people who helped make Tales of the Valiant happen? I'd be not very good at my job, is what I would say.
What's up next, Kendo?
Yes, next up, after a quick break, we're going to do another bio. Please get up, get some water, but we will be back, because if you are interested in what does it feel like to make a character in Tales of the Valiant, you're going to be able to see just that. With another fellow Kobold, me and Kim are going to show you how to make a character in Tales of the Valiant using the Shard platform.
Oh, Shard tabletop? Sweet.
So yes, if you've been like, oh, I want to learn how to make a character, and like, oh, there's all these all these new VTTs that are going to be using it. How am I going to do it? You're about to find out. So stay tuned, and we will see you all after the break. See y'all.
Bye, everybody.